Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had a Dark Ghost Ability? Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku was staring up at the UA gates, eyes full of sheer wonder. It's the day of the entrance exam, and he is pretty sure this will be the first and last time he will ever walk through this giant gate in his pitiful life. Izuku immediately banished this thought from his mind. It was the big day, a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and he wouldn't let his negative thoughts get in the way of that, not when he had enough of this kind of thought progress any other day. He took one last breath, plastered his sunshine, "I'm innocent and harmless" smile on his face. He had a reputation to uphold after all, before walking through the gate, hoping hard that it wouldn't be the last time he walked trough. 7 pairs of eyes were watching him silently from behind, going unnoticed by the greenet. Izuku was sitting in the massive room where someone would explain what the test was about in a few minutes. His positive energy from earlier died down when no other but Bakugo Katsuki, his childhood friend turned bully, walked in and sat right beside his effing seat. He took a deep breath, bracing for the incoming tantrum that Bakugo would no doubt have as soon as he saw him. Never one to fail Izuku's expectations, the ash blonde started to scream. Izuku was just happy not many other examiners were there yet, otherwise it would have been pretty embarrassing for both of them, but he could feel their judgmental gazes on him. "What are you doing here, you useless Deku? Do you think you're better than me?" How Katsuki got that idea, Izuku did not know. Never in his life had he even done the slightest thing that could make the angry Pomeranian get that idea, but he can't change that now. It wasn't his decision to start bullying and hate himself all of a sudden, after all, no, it was Bakugo's, so he will not try to save whatever they have. "No Kaken, you? Kaken," as if Izuku thought of him as Kaken, "I don't." The blonde continued to scream at our favorite bush till the present Mike, walked in and quieted the room down. The hero started to explain what the exam was about. He explained the 3 robots, the easy, medium, and hard villain or 1, 2, and 3 pointer. Izuku picked up on the fact that he seemed to wait with explaining the giant robot, the 0 pointer, or the arena traps his mind supplied. Once it seemed like Mike came to an end with his explanation, and still didn't mention a thing about the 0 pointer, one of the examiners in front of him stood up and spoke. "Excuse me, sir, but I couldn't help but notice that you didn't mention the last robot. Here on my paper are 4 robots, and you only mentioned the first 3. This is unacceptable behavior of such a prestigious school like UA. And you dash." Then the motherfucker turned to him of all people and proceeded to lecture him on his mumble habit, like how deep was the stick in his butt. "With the green hair, stop the mumbling at once, it's unbecoming for a student to disturb everyone with your mumbling. Izuku just stared at the navy-haired teen till he was clearly uncomfortable before standing up and bowing to the teen. "I'm so sorry to have disturbed you in any way. It was really not my intention. I'll try to stop muttering, but it's really hard for me not to." Izuku could throw the F up. He tried to keep his expression friendly, which took more effort than pretending to like decaf. Which said a lot. He was a coffee-dependent insomniac, so decaf was his absolute hate drink. Besides maybe Dr. Pepper, out there. "You're right, examine 7111, thanks for the reminder, the 4th robot gives 0 points, he's just an obstacle. He's like the thwomp in Super Mario Bros." Izuku immediately picked up on the hidden point counting system. Rescue points, makes sense when you think about the fact that this is a hero exam, they are there to save people. Izuku found himself in front of the gates into the fake city, where the whole exam would take place. He and Bakugo luckily weren't in the same exam area, otherwise he would have had a breakdown. He would not be able to deal with thousands of explosions every second and Bakugo being an a-hole while he's slowly losing hope. "Yeah, no thanks," he thought dryly. He looked around at the other examiners hoping to analyze their quirks and make a plan that hopefully would not involve using the others too much. After a few precious moments of just looking around and analyzing, his eyes locked with those of an indigo-haired teen. His eyes held a certain sort of exhaustion Izuku himself felt most of the time, and his eye bags were nearly as bad as his, and Izuku's eye bags were so strong that you could still see them even after half a package of counselor. Izuku idly wondered what the teen's quirk might be, and if the obvious abuse either from peers or guardians the other endured was because of it or not, when the other's expression turned defensive and angry. Izuku gave the teen a tight smile in the hope of easing his worries, which the tired teen just rolled his eyes at and started walking over. Izuku was silently freaking out while he did because he did not have the social skills to talk with a stranger. Even worse, he was not just sleep-deprived but also absolutely nervous and filled with dread because of the exam. He would absolutely embarrass himself in front of this hot-looking guy. What was he even thinking? It really was not the time for a gay panic. Izuku, his mind hissed at him. He snapped out of his swooning when the indigo-colored teen stopped in front of him. A few months before the entrance exam, Yoichi was staring at the green-haired child with concern. In moments like these he wished he would still be able to touch things and speak with living beings. The teen was clearly hurt, his school uniform burned around the edges and a constant limp in his steps. Yoichi would love to have Nana here at the moment. She was always good at comforting him when things like these happened. But alas, she wasn't, and neither was another past user. The only one there was he, the teen, and a few civilians who just ignored him. When the teen entered a high building and started to walk up the stairs that lead to the roof, Yoichi's heart sank. He wasn't stupid, he knew why a probably abused, and bullying could count as abuse, child would walk up the stairs to the roof of a high building, and the situation was not looking good. When the teen opened the door to the roof, Yoichi floated in front of him. He did not expect anything to happen, especially not for the teen to just stop in his path to the edge. But that was exactly what happened. The teen froze and stared directly into Yoichi's eyes. And he knew it shouldn't be possible. He knew he was dead, and he knew living beings, excluding cats, shouldn't see ghosts. But the teen obviously didn't care about that. He just stared and stared and stared. And then the kid smiled at him. He smiled. The green-haired kid who just walked up a rooftop to presumably kill himself smiled. And not just a small one. No, the kid shot him the most blinding smile he ever saw in his life, afterlife. But like he said before, Yoichi was not stupid, he could look right through it. The kid was not sending him an honest, kind, happy smile. No, the smile was fake, even more so than Yagi's All Might's. "Kid, what are you doing on a roof?" he asked him, trying to make his voice and expression as curious as possible to hide his worry. The kid didn't look like worry was what he needed. "What I always do on rooftops, sir. I'm just here to take a little break of all the stuff that's going on down there." The kid pointed at the crowded streets beneath them and shrugged. Yoichi was a little worried about the fact that the kid was on rooftops often, when what he just said was any indication. And the fake politeness was also a reason to worry. A kid his age shouldn't know how to fake a whole personality that good. Seemingly misinterpreting Yoichi's silence, the teen continued speaking. "I'm not a fan of crowds, or attention, or social interaction at that." And Yoichi did not know what to say to that because mood, but also wasn't it worrying that the teen decided to take a break on a roof high enough to die on impact, if you fell, or jumped, down. He decided to ignore that little fact for now and play along with the kid. Also, he was curious about how the teen could see him. So he did what any curious person would do, he asked questions. "Okay, let's say I believe you. How can you even see me?" And the kid tensed for just a second, but it was enough for Yoichi to pick up on. He learned pretty soon how to read the body language. He needed to know what mood his brother was in after all. So he tried to look as non-threatening as possible. "Well, the boy started hesitantly, "I can see ghosts because of my quirk." And wasn't that cool? Yoichi loved quirks, so it was not surprising for him to immediately get extremely excited about it or that his mind demanded to know more about it. He didn't think the kid would appreciate questions about his quirk at the moment though, so he just forced himself to ask another question. "Can I ask you to get down from the roof and tell me what happened?" The kid scrutinized him for a few seconds before nodding and trotting of Yoichi following him a few steps behind, even when he never actually touched the ground. He made sure that the kid really walked down and didn't just wait a few seconds before going back up. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, not leaving the building quite yet, the green-haired kid turned and looked at him expectantly. Yoichi was confused for a few seconds before remembering that he wanted to talk to the kid, not the other way around. So what exactly happened for you to look like that? The kid paused for a second and looked himself up and down before grimacing. Yuichi wondered if the kid actually forgot that he had burns, bruises and cuts on his whole body before deciding he would worry about the kid's pain tolerance later. Some of my classmates don't like me that much, the teen answered, and Yuichi was surprised that the greenet was so honest to him, before remembering that even if he wanted, which he did not, he couldn't tell others what he heard. He was a ghost after all. Now I want to ask you a question for an answer. Yuichi did not like the mischief in the kid's eyes, like at all. But he just nodded his understand and waited for the kid to ask his question, a little scared of what would happen. Sue, why were you following me? And it wasn't that a question. How was he supposed to answer that, yeah, I saw you looking like you could pass out any second, and because you can't see me anyways, I decided to follow you around. Did not necessarily sound fine, but what else could he say? Seems like he just had to improvise then. You seemed hurt and I wanted to help, even if I'm a ghost and can't touch things or speak with living beings. Usually, his eyes locked with a toxic green eyes that seemed to be analyzed his very being. The boy still looked a little unconvinced, but ended up just shrugging. Their little game continued for a while. Yuichi found out that the kid's name was Izuku Midoriya and nobody really knew that he could see ghosts, not because he didn't tell people but because nobody believed him. He also found out a little more about the kid's quirk. From what he got told, Midoriya could not only see ghosts but he and the ghost were also able to touch, and Izuku could use the ghost's quirk for a short period of time. Midoriya said he was training his quirk and physical strength at the moment. He already improved his quirk. Now he could use a ghost's quirk 30 seconds longer than when he started, which were about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on his energy level and the quirk he was using. It also seems like there were much more ghosts than Yuichi thought because Midoriya had met his fair share of ghosts since he found out he could see them, which, when Midoriya's words was to believe, which Yuichi was sure they were, was the age of Yuichi would say he and Midoriya were becoming good friend. The kid even told him his address, so Yuichi could find him if necessary. And Yuichi was so gonna bring Nana and Banjo and maybe even Hikage. If he wanted to, he could also bring Ed, when he went to visit the kid. He would absolutely embarrass himself in front of this hot-looking guy. What was he even thinking? It really was not the time for a gay panic. Izuku, his mind hissed at him. He snapped out of his swooning when the indigo-colored teen stopped in front of him. What? Never seen a mess in motion before? Take a picture, it lasts longer. There was a certain bite to the teen's voice, but Izuku could hear the tired resignation behind all that bite, and he knew that feeling. It was the kind of resignation that came with years of hoping for better, years of living in pain and loneliness. It was a feeling Izuku knew all too well. So, the teen was emotionally and mentally fed, probably sleep-deprived and inhumanly hot. The teen also wanted to become a hero and had this quiet but firm determination that Izuku saw it himself when he looked in the mirror. Now Izuku's problem here is he had to beware his act. He couldn't just throw all this years of carefully crafted lies away for a hot-looking emotionally stunt sarcastic teen. That just wasn't in it for him. He was too strange for a relationship anyways. If you insist, Izuku answered coolly, phone already in hand. Stupid, you're supposed to be a useless, weak nerd, not a sarcastic teen with a breeze of depression and insomnia thrown into the mix. He berated himself. The indigo-haired teen just stared at him, seemingly not expecting that answer, before smirking, and oh boy that smirk, and turning in a way that gave Izuku the perfect angle to shoot a picture, which he, like the absolute simp he is, of course shot. And just a second after Izuku put his phone, which when he thought about it he should probably have left in his bag, into his back pocket, the doors opened. He gave the indigo-haired teen a short salute before running through the not yet completely open door. From the shouts behind him, he was one of the first people that run into the area. Which was good because it meant there was a higher change to get the most points, but it would also draw attention to him, which was something he tried hard to avoid. He ran into one of the many alleyways and used a trash can to jump up to the fire escape. He grabbed onto the ladder of the fire escape and pulled himself up. He climbed the ladder step by step till he reached the rooftop. Seems like all the training was worth it. From the top of the rooftop he started jumping from roof to roof, letting himself fall on robots here and there, pulling people out of danger for the rescue points and all in all just trying his DMN hardest. In the end he was pretty certain that he had enough points to get accepted. He jumped down on a robot that tried to attack the hot teen from before. Use the terrain to your advantage. He shouted at him, hoping that he at least helped him a bit, before continuing jumping from roof to roof. When about 6:02 minutes were left, Izuku took a break on one of the roofs trying to catch his breath, when the ground started to shake. Izuku nearly fell down, which would not have been funny. He looked at the centrum of the city when he saw most if not all of the examiners running away from there, just for his eyes to land on a giant robot. Even though Izuku knew the robot would be big, he underestimated the length Nizu would take to ensure he didn't get bored. The robot was massive and it was destroying the city left and right. Izuku was already half-turned and ready to get the F away from that thing when he heard a cry for help, and Izuku with his goddamn hero complex of course had to run in the robot's direction instead of away from it like originally planned. Just when he thought he might have misheard something, he heard another shout and his head whipped so fast in the direction it was coming from, he saw stars. There was a brown-haired girl stuck under a piece of rubble, trying her best to get out. Now Izuku couldn't turn the other way anymore. He ran to the girl and kneeled beside her head. Assessing the situation as good as possible, she didn't seem to hurt, but he couldn't see much from her legs that were buried under the rubble. "What's your quirk?" he asked, trying not to let his slight panic show. He hoped really hard that she had a quirk that could help, but it was unlikely. She would probably have used it if she had a chance to do so. "I can turn the gravity of solid objects but I need to touch it with all 5 fingers at once, and I can't reach the rubble." Izuku could hear the slight panic in her voice. He really didn't like what that left him with, but what else could he do? Izuku breathed out a deep sigh before starting to look for Yoichi, sure that the young man would hover somewhere near him. And he was right. Yoichi was just a few feet away, looking worriedly between Izuku and the robot. Izuku waved him over, and the clear relief that Izuku finally acknowledged him on Yoichi's face was almost enough to make him huff out a laugh, almost. He could theoretically communicate through the mind, but it was harder and used up a little of his stamina, and he needed all the stamina he could muster for the next step of his plan. "Hey Yoichi, did you meet any other friends that could be of assistance with this?" He gestured at the rubble before him. The robot was coming closer every second, and to say Izuku was stressed was an understatement. If Yoichi hasn't met another ghost, he won't be able to save the girl nor himself. Well, he could probably use Benjo's quirk, but Izuku was worried Benjo wouldn't make it in time. But to his relief, Yoichi nodded, and a few seconds later a light blue-haired teen appeared next to him. Izuku was so thankful for the ability of ghosts to communicate with each other through the mind when both were okay with it. "Hey bro, what's up?" And Izuku recognized the teen. His old hero name was Loud Cloud, and he died on an internship in his 3rd year. His quirk let him summon dense clouds that could transport people or objects up to a certain weight. "Oboro, right?" Izuku asked. The blue-haired ghost jolted in surprise before turning his wide eyes in Izuku's direction. Yoichi looked at Izuku with a confused frown, probably wondering how Izuku knew Oboro's name, before shaking his head and gestured for Izuku to hurry. "Listen, I'll explain later, but we have to hurry the F up or it will be too late. Do I have your permission to use your quirk?" The ghost teen nodded, a serious but confused expression on his face before turning his whole body in Izuku's direction. "Do what you gotta do." And Izuku didn't waste a second longer. He grabbed Oboro's wrist and took a hold on the young ghost's quirk. Oboro let out an confused squawk, but Izuku didn't notice. He could feel the quirk in his body, like a soft weightless pressure that was slowly floating through his body. It wasn't painful like pierce, but it was weird. Izuku tried to lift the fog that suddenly appeared from his mind. After the second try he could think a little more clearly and immediately turned to the giant robot. He used the inside of the quirk that he got when he took hold of the quirk and used a pretty big cloud to carry the robot up in the sky. As soon as the robot couldn't move without falling, he turned and used a smaller cloud to move the rubble from the girl's legs. "The exam is over, listeners. Please come back to the gate, and if injured please wait there for recovery girl to take a look." With that, Izuku lowered the robot back to the ground, making sure nobody was in the area the robot would land. As soon as the robot landed, Izuku let go of the quirk and rubbed his temple. Every quirk he possessed would have his own drawbacks, but a migraine seemed to be a similarity between all of them. This quirk seemed to only have this weird fog-like effect on his mind, and his thoughts were a little distant. He assessed his body just to make sure, but the only difference was the numbness in his fingertips, like when you're out on a cold winter day. He turned to look at the girl after he took several deep breaths and sent her one of his bright smiles. "Can you walk? If not, I can carry you back to the gates." He actually did not want to do that, but as a hero he had to help these in need. So when the girl tried to stand just for her legs to give out, he pushed these thoughts as far back into his mind as possible, and Princess carried the brunette to the gates. "You can lay her down here, honey," an older voice said from behind him. Izuku turned around and gave Recovery Girl a short nod before gently placing the girl onto one of the medical blankets. After Recovery Girl gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, he left the UA grounds, the two ghosts following behind. Izuku was sure the blue-haired ghost would start interrogating him soon. Shota did not understand how Zashi could be that excited for an exam where they had to watch millions of bright hero wannabes get their hopes crushed under the foot of a giant robot. Okay, when he said it like that, it did sound quite funny. But still, who in their right mind would want to watch hormonal teens beat up some robots? And he had to decide which ones were worth keeping in the school and which weren't. He already knew he would need a year-long nap afterwards. Shota let out a long, exhausted sigh, making sure his husband could hear the suffering in it, hoping the cockatoo would release him from his suffering. But no, the BSTD just laughed at him. Laughed at him. If Shota didn't know better, he'd say the voice hero was silently enjoying Shota's suffering. He didn't know better. "Oh, come on, Sho, it's not even that bad, you're just dramatic." Shota sent Zashi one last glare before deciding to spend the rest of their car ride to UA with pouting and looking out the window. Maybe he would even manage a quick nap while he had time. Shota stretched all his limbs out and popped his back. He ended up actually falling asleep in the car seat. It was not the most comfortable place he ever slept in, but not the worst place either. He really didn't feel like sitting the rest of the day though. He had to part ways with the cockatoo. Shota was going to the observation room while Zashi was going to the assembly hall. He was not jealous of his husband at all. The poor man had to explain the exam to a bunch of arrogant teens with perfect quirks. Shota entered the observation room and immediately felt tense. He had this feeling in his stomach that he hated, a sort of hero instinct that had saved his life a few times already. That he got it the moment he walked into the room was not a good sign. Shota could see that the others were feeling it too. They were also all tense and seemed on edge. It didn't make him feel any better. When one hero was tense, it didn't necessarily mean something is gonna happen, but a whole room full. He just couldn't see the day ending well. After a short while of waiting, Nizu walked in, All Might, the new teacher this year, entering behind him. Shota groaned silently to himself. He still wasn't really thrilled about the fact that All Might was a teacher this year. The man didn't even have a teacher license and could barely teach 3 hours at a time with his stupid time limit. Who would have thought that the symbol of peace was in reality a skeleton? Well, Shota knew that he didn't. It was a total surprise when Nizu introduced Toshinori at the last teachers' conference. By the looks the staff sent All Might's way, they were still not used to seeing him like that. He shook his head to clear it from that path of thoughts. Nizu must have had his reasons, he told himself. He still made it his mission to make the symbol of peace feel as uncomfortable as possible while the man was there. "Hello, my staff. I hope you're all ready for the exam. You will teach a few of them next year after all." Shota could see the way Nizu's fur was standing on end and how he was looking at everyone with 2 sharp eyes. It unnerved him even more than the fact that the other pros were on edge, because Nizu was normally always composed and calm even in the worst situations. For him to be so on edge, well, something was definitely up. After looking at Shota for a few seconds too long, the rodent turned around and started to play the live feat of the exam. Shota took a calming breath before turning his full attention on the screen. If he was lucky, he could find a few kids with potential. Nizu would put them in his class if he asks, but the rat would put the problem students in his class as WO. Well, you can't always win. He took a deep breath and concentrated on the exam. The gates will open every second now, and Shota really wanted to know if there would be any kids this year that will run in as soon as the gates open. The last few years were disappointing in that regard. The gates opened and Shota could only see one green-haired kid running in. It was a little disappointing but not really unexpected. One kid was more than none like in the last few years, so Shota would take it. The rest of the exam was going like normal. The only unusual thing was the green-it from the start using rooftops and actually saving people. He was also pretty good for someone without professional training. It was good to see a few people still doing heroics for the right reason. In Zone B was an ash blonde-haired kid that Shota hoped wouldn't end up in his class. He didn't dare to hope though, because when he knew one thing about his boss, it was that the guy would always place the worst troublemaker in his class. He already prepared himself mentally for the next 3 years. When there were only about 4 minutes left, the rat started to emit an excited energy. Shota took one look at him and immediately questioned all his life choices that led to this moment. Release the robot. Nizu's excited voice filtered trough the room. Already? Snipe asked, sounding uncertain. Nizu just stared at Snipe with his beery black eyes till the pro gave in and pressed the button for the 0-pointer to be released. After a while, Shota could hear a sharp gasp from Nemuri. There's someone under the rubble in Zone C, she said, her voice sounding tense. Every pro was now staring at the screen for Zone C with full concentration. They were all at the edge of their seats. But to Shota's and the rest's disappointment, nobody stopped to look at the brunette who was in great danger of getting run over by the giant robot. Snipe was already ready to stop the robot when they saw the green-haired kid running to the girl. Shota was impressed once more by the heroic spirit of the kid. The robot was only a few feet away and would step on both kids any minute now. Every single hero in the room held their breath and stared at the screen, hoping to whatever god that the boy would manage to save them in time. Which in theory is stupid, because Power Loader programmed the robot in a way that it is practically impossible to get under him. The knowledge didn't help much when the fear in the kid's eyes was real though. The kid paused in front of the girl and seemed to be talking with her. After they exchanged words, the kid turned away from the girl and let his face fill with disappointment for a second before he schooled his expression back into that cheerful grin. The kid was seemingly just standing there staring into place, but Shota could see his lips moving, and just when he started to think the boy wouldn't try helping the girl anymore, his hair turned white and the teen turned to the robot. The kid paused in front of the girl and seemed to be talking with her. After they exchanged words, the kid's face filled with disappointment for a second before he schooled his expression back into that cheerful grin. The kid was seemingly just standing there staring into place, but Shota could see his lips moving, and just when he started to think the boy wouldn't try helping the girl anymore, he turned to the robot. The whole room dropped in temperature when a cloud formed under the robot's feet and transported it upward. Shota knew that cloud, and the person who could summon them was dead. He would know. He saw it happening. He could see Nem shooting him a worried look from the edge of his vision, but he ignored it in favor of trying to suppress all the memories from coming back up. Shota had his phone out in seconds, ready to call his husband to make sure he wasn't thinking too much into this, when Nizu's eyes met his. The Chimera had this understanding look on his face that Shota had only seen once so far. It calmed him a little, and when his boss shook his head slightly, he put his phone back into his pocket, deciding to talk with Zashi later. The exam is over, listeners. Please come back to the gate, and if injured, please wait there for recovery girl to take a look. As soon as he heard his husband's voice announcing the end of the exam, he was out of his chair. With a look in Nizu's direction, he made sure he was allowed to leave. When Nizu gave him a small nod, he was sprinting in the direction of his cockatoo. The man was already walking in his direction when he found him, tear stains on his cheek, the only evidence he had been crying. You saw it too then? It wasn't a question, but Shota still nodded, trying hard not to break down from the voice cracks in his husband's shaky voice. He knew that it could have been from screaming so much, but they both knew it wasn't. They were still grieving their best friend and the person they wanted to ask out. Hizashi and Shota started dating after their first sport festival and planned to ask Oboro out in their second year, a few weeks after their hero work study in which Oboro died. They were two absolute messes after the work study, Shota not even able to eat most of the days. Nemuri was the one who snapped them out of it in the end. It was probably just a coincidence. Shota knew his husband wasn't believing that himself, but they both knew what would happen if they gave in to their grief. And when they got their hopes up now, it will end up in an even worse situation. So the only logical decision was to not think about it too much. Stage of grief, denial. His traitorous mind whispered. He just closed his eyes and tried to calm the malicious thoughts as good as he could in the middle of the halls. As soon as he and Zashi were home, they cuddled up on their couch putting on some bad-made movie. Normally Zashi would start commenting on everything that happens and they would make fun of the cast, but now they were both silent, staring at the display without taking anything in. They knew they had to make a call to their therapists, but that could wait at the moment. They just wanted to take comfort in the other's presence. In the end they fell asleep in each other's arms, tears staining their cheeks, eyes red and puffy, but they couldn't wish to cope with their grief any other way. They always grieved like that. They did the first time they lost Oboro, and they will again. As soon as the new week started, both heroes were back to work. Were they still grieving? Would they sit at home and let their sorrow get the better of them? Absolutely not. They theoretically knew it was unhealthy to overwork for the sake of forgetting, but they needed to be productive or they'd lose their mind. They were sitting in the staff meeting room at the moment, talking about the upcoming school year. Like Shota expected, he was the homeroom teacher of Class 1A with Bakugo Katsuki, but also the greenet Midoriya Izuku in it. Shota thought the name was kind of funny, it suited him. He would also most certainly talk with Midoriya about the clouds because Shota did read their files this year just to look if the kid was related to Oboro. He wasn't, but Shota found something else concerning. The kid was quirkless, and the kid used a quirk at the entrance exam. So either he stress manifested one because of the robot or he was hiding a quirk. And Shota was betting on the second option. You couldn't tell him the kid didn't know what was happening. There was no shock or fear in his face while he used the quirk. And Shota analyzed every second of that moment till Zashi dragged him away from the screen. He might not be as analytic as Nizu, but he was the rat's personal student for a reason, and it was not his feral tendencies. He was also concerned about Bakugo's file. Both he and Midoriya went to the same middle school, and while the nervous-looking teen was nearly blacklisted because of fights with his peers, the kid with the anger issues did not have one single bad comment in their file at all. Shota knew how the quirkless population is treated nowadays. He saw his own share of red shoes lining the edge of a roof. He just really hoped Bakugo was not Midoriya's bully. Yude had a strict anti-bullying policy after all, and they won't be making any exceptions for a bully just because of their strong quirk. I want the Bakugo kid in anger management, he practically sighed out. Nizu's button eyes found his, and the principal tilted his head to the side like a confused puppy. Shota wouldn't tell that to the rodent's face, of course. He was still very fond of his life. Thank you very much. Why is that, Shota-kun? Shota glared at the rat that he called his boss. What did he mean? Was he blind or something? He just had to take a look at the shouting blonde to see the anger issues. And even though Shota hated bullies, the kid needed help with those. He clearly needs some help. I won't be teaching the next endeavor, so either he stops being such an abrasive a-hole alone or he gets anger management courses. His boss nodded a little and turned to Ryo, the haunting dog hero and the guidance counselor of UA. Ryo nodded his agreement and Shota nodded at him in thanks. Also, is there any good reason we let Mineta Minoru into the hero course? He has more than just one black mark for SXL assault on his file. Every hero in the room turned to Nizu, confused on the fact Nizu, the rat who brought down whole schools because of abuse or bullying, was allowing someone like Minoru into the hero course of all things. Nizu's constant smile turned a little downwards and his whole expression screamed, "I'm as upset about that than you are. If I had it my way, he wouldn't be allowed on Yuda ground at all, but his parents are pretty high-ranking members at the school board." The whole room turned a stage colder. They were having with the school board for a while now, and they seemed to push it every time. Shota could feel his husband pressing his hand a little, and sent him a grateful yet small smile. "I want you to get enough evidence and expel him." Aizawa nodded, the hair on his neck standing up a little at the tone Nizu used. "If that's all," the principal paused for a second, waiting for disagreement before continuing, "dismissed." Zashi and he took their things and left the room. Shota was ready to just take a long shower and let himself fall into his soft bed. "You can lay her down here, honey," an older voice said from behind him. Izuku turned around and gave Recovery Girl a short nod before gently placing the girl onto one of the medical blankets. After Recovery Girl gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, he left the UA grounds, the two ghosts following behind. Izuku was sure the blue-haired ghost would start interrogating him soon. That was awesome. You just used my quirk to lift the robot, and your hair turned white. That was just, whoa. Izuku smiled a little to himself. He knew Oboro was energetic, but the fact that he was still so full of pure joy even in death? It showed what a strong soul the would-be hero had. Thanks, but I wouldn't have managed without your quirk. Nah, you totally rocked it. I bet everyone thinks that too. Yeah, right? Izuku chuckled nervously. His eyes met Yoichi's worried ones, and he shook his head slightly. No need to bring Oboro's mood down. Oboro, totally oblivious to the silent conversation between the two, spoke up again. So, what's your name? You know mine for whatever reason, so it's only fair if you tell me yours. Izuku glanced at the ghost before shrugging. Legally? Izuku Midoriya. But my mum calls me ungrateful brat. Oboro paused, wide eyes turning to him, a startled laugh ripping from his chest. I'm sorry. I didn't really expect that kind of answer. Izuku gave him a carefree grin. He was grateful that the ghost was taking it with humor. Some people didn't get that he was joking and started asking too many questions. That always stopped, of course, once Izuku revealed his quirklessness. But he was fine with that. I had a similar reaction, a calm voice said behind them. Izuku was sure he jumped at least 3 feet in the air. He'd totally forgotten Yoichi was there. The ghost could be really quiet when he wanted to be. Sadly, he didn't want to be very often. They talked for the rest of the walk to Izuku's apartment, where Izuku immediately changed into his comfiest clothes and let himself fall into bed. The ghosts exchanged fond looks outside his bedroom door, where he had made them stay. Izuku's anxiety was shooting through the roof. The UA letter could arrive any second, and even though Oboro had told him he got in, anxiety was creeping into his chest and threatening to take over his rational thoughts. His head snapped up at the sound of rustling papers. He practically sprinted to the door. The mailman's startled eyes greeted him when he threw it open, clearly not expecting that. The man in the blue uniform handed him the letter, excitement quickly replacing his startled expression. Is that the letter from UA? My cousin gets his today too. A big grin formed on Izuku's face as he nodded excitedly. Yeah, it is. What's your cousin's name? Maybe we'll be in the same class. His name's Shinso Hitoshi. He took the exam for both the general education and the hero course. The mailman stuck out his hand. Oto Haruki the name. Call me Haruki though. Izuku took the offered hand and introduced himself. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku's fine. He was secretly hoping Shinso would get into the hero course. If they both got in, he'd already have a potential friend. I took the hero exam too. Let me open the letter real quick, then we'll know if I got in. Haruki put his bag down, looking at Izuku with a grateful expression, and nodded. Izuku opened the letter and a disc fell out. He did not squeak when it hit the floor. He did not. When the disc landed, a hologram of All Might appeared and began explaining the rescue points. Izuku was getting a little annoyed. He wasn't All Might's biggest fan, and the hero just wouldn't stop talking. When Izuku looked at the mailman, he saw his own emotions mirrored on the guy's face. Haruki obviously wasn't a big All Might fan either. Welcome, Midoriya Izuku, to your hero academia. All Might finally finished. Izuku knew he'd get in, but he still let out a relieved breath and smiled softly to himself. The sound of a ringing phone pulled him out of his happy trance. He looked up to see Haruki checking his phone. The mailman gave him an apologetic smile before walking a few feet away. Izuku could still hear the young man's voice, though. Hey, Auntie. The hero or general education course? The hero course. Give him my congratulations, please. I'll be there after my shift. I won't. I'm 23, not 12. Bye. Love you too. Haruki hung up, slipped his phone back into his pocket, and turned to Izuku with a big grin. Toshi got into the hero course class 1A. Which class are you? Izuku looked back at the letter where All Might's hologram had said more information would be, and scanned for his class. Class 1A. It was written there in bold letters. He looked up, a big grin on his face. Class 1A. I'm gonna be in the same class as your cousin. Haruki chuckled and held his phone out for Izuku to take. Give me your number, then we can stay in contact. Izuku took the phone and typed in his number. He wasn't sure why Haruki wanted to stay in contact with him, but he wouldn't question it. After he typed in his number, he gave the phone back to its owner, who sent Izuku a small grin. I'm gonna give your number to my cousin if that's alright with you. He doesn't have many friends. Izuku nodded. He himself didn't have many either after all, and it would be cool to have a friend in his class. He could see Oboro sending him a thumbs up from behind Haruki. When the ghost got there, Izuku did not know. As long as he knew, the ghost was with present Mike and Eraserhead. They were best friends in Uda, and if Izuku was right with his observations, which he was most of the time, Oboro even had a crush on them both. Let him tell you, with the amount of embarrassing stories Oboro told him about them, Izuku wouldn't be able to look them into the eyes anymore. Izuku was just minding his own business, which was silently freaking out about the fact he was going to Uda at the moment and would meet Toshi in real life, both of them talking online since Haruki gave Izuku's number to the other boy, when he heard a pitiful meow in the alley next to him. Izuku, the sleep-deprived idiot he was, immediately walked into the alley to make sure the cat he just heard was fine, not even thinking about the fact he was walking into an alleyway alone. Luckily for him, there was not some creepy old guy in the alley waiting to jump him, but what he saw instead made his blood run cold. A tiny kitten, not more than a few months old, was crying, its trembling body pressed against its lifeless form on the ground. Izuku stepped forward, heart sinking, and noticed 2 deep knife wounds on the kitten's body. It already stopped bleeding, which means it must have been here for a while already. His heart broke at that. The cat was so young and somebody murdered it. He just couldn't think of any reason as to why. Hey little one, he whispered in the softest voice he could manage, it's okay. Whoever did this to you won't get to you ever again. The kitten's little head turned to him, and Izuku could see a sort of broken in the kitten's gaze that he himself saw in his reflection before meeting. If you let me, I'd protect you, he whispered, even if you're already gone. I won't let anyone hurt you again, I promise. Izuku knew he only just met the kitten, but he felt this sort of connection to it that he couldn't just ignore. To his surprise, the kitten took a few cautious steps forward, which Izuku was impressed with because Oboro once told him how hard it was to walk normally as a ghost, before leaping into his arms and curling around his neck like it belonged there. Izuku let a small smile onto his face and chuckled lightly. Maybe it was different for cats. It did seem like the cat he really needed to name it didn't have any problems with it whatsoever. I have to go catch my train or I'm gonna be late for my first day at UA. You can tag along if you want to. The cat just snuggled up to him tighter and let out a pleased meow. Okay then, kitten. He considered the kitten for a while before the prefect name popped into his head, or he was just hungry. He did skip breakfast today. I'm gonna call you Nugget. What do you think? The cat looked up at him, tilting her head a little bit, before giving a soft purr. About half an hour later, Izuku was standing in front of the Uda gates, Nugget still curled tightly around his neck. He took a deep breath before entering the prestigious school for the second time. It wasn't even a minute later that he wished he didn't enter the school at all. He was standing in front of the classroom doors of 1A, already hearing Bakugo shouting. Izuku really didn't feel like putting up with Bakugo's bullshit. When he opened the door, bright sunshine smile already in place, all heads immediately turned to him, and Izuku tried his hardest not to shrink under the attention. He may be a sassy, sleep-deprived teen with too much caffeine in his system that literally talked to ghosts on a daily, but social interactions still made him rethink every decision he ever made. Nugget, probably feeling his anxiety, meowed softly at him, soothing his worries a little. His plan to just scurry off to his desk and hope the others would go back to their conversations was prevented by the uptight navy-haired teen from the exam, who, now that Izuku could get a better look at him, seemed very familiar, walking up to him. Ida Tenya from Sohei Dash. The teen, Ida, started. Yeah. I know, Izuku interrupted the teen. He really didn't want to have a conversation at the moment. Thank you very much. And he heard that part of the argument between Bakugo and Ida anyways. There really was no need to repeat everything. Midoriya Izuku, nice to meet you. He introduced himself, his sunshine smile not leaving for even a second. Midoriya, you realized that there was something more to the practical exam, didn't you? You must be very perceptive. And I completely misjudged you. I admit as a student you're far superior to me. Ida seemed to be in physical pain saying that. And while yes, Izuku did realize there were rescue points in the exam, he highly doubted that made him any superior to the others. Before he had to answer, the brunette he had saved from the zero-pointer walked in behind him. Hey, I recognize that messed up hair dash. Ouch, he could hear someone say from the vents. He was pretty sure it was Oboro, only he would watch everything from the vents even though Izuku was the only one who could see him. You're the weird kid that saved me from the robot, aren't you? Izuku inwardly groaned. Being remembered as the weird kid with messed up hair really wasn't on his bucket list. If you're just here to make friends, then you can pack up your stuff now. Izuku's eyes fell onto a yellow abomination of a sleeping bag. Oboro was floating slightly above it, a big grin on his face. Hey Izuku. Let me introduce to you Shota Aizawa or Eraserhead. Izuku's eyes widened. It was just his luck that he would get Eraserhead of all people as his homeroom teacher. How was he supposed to take him seriously after all the crap Oboro told him about? Welcome to today's hero course, the worn-out-looking man said, slurping on some kind of jelly pouch. It took 8 seconds for you all to shut up. That's not gonna work. Time is precious. Rational students would understand that. Eraserhead continued while stepping out of his sleeping bag. He was wearing a black jumpsuit that looked really comfortable if Izuku was being honest. The man had his white-gray scarf around his neck, but the iconic yellow goggles were nowhere in sight. Hello, I'm Shota Aizawa. Your teacher. It was kind of funny how almost every student in the room let out an collective, huh, like it was rehearsed. He could see Oboro laughing behind Aizawa. Sensei, that's what Izuku should call him now, right? Right, let's get to it. Put these on and head outside, their new teacher drawled before pulling gym uniforms out of practically nowhere and throwing them on his desk. Izuku didn't waste a second with snatching one and fleeing from the room. He was a little sad he didn't get to talk with Hitoshi yet, but he would rather not stay and have conversations with bubbly girls and uptight boys. Hitoshi, luckily, was the first one to arrive in the classroom. He immediately took the seat in the left corner right at the back. It was the best place to sit if you don't want too much attention. He really hoped Izuku was as kind in real-life settings than he was over chat. The boy was really sassy over text, and his and Hitoshi's dark humor were eerily similar. Izuku did tell him he would be putting up a persona in school, but that's the reason they made a kind of code word. If one of his classmates would mention black cats and white scarves in one sentence, it was probably Izuku. At some point he just spaced out till a ash blonde with ruby red eyes and a navy-haired kid with glasses began to argue. Hitoshi didn't even get why. Just because one of them had his feet on the table and didn't want to take them down or whatever. He did look up when a familiar green-haired kid walked in and Hitoshi could see the "I would rather be anywhere than here" in his eyes even with the bright smile on his face. The boy did hid the look pretty fast as soon as everyone turned to look at the new addition, but Hitoshi had already seen it. He really hoped that boy was Izuku because he would love to befriend the boy who actually took a picture of him and answered his defensive sarcasm with even more. The boy got pulled into a conversation with the uptight boy, what was his name again? Ida? And a girl that just walked in, all bubbly and chatter. Hitoshi felt kinda bad for the greenet. After a while his eyes fell onto a bright yellow sleeping bag on the ground. It looked a little like a overgrown caterpillar. Welcome to today's hero course, the caterpillar said, slurping on some kind of jelly pouch. It took 8 seconds for you all to shut up. That's not gonna work. Time is precious. Rational students would understand that. The caterpillar scolded. He was wearing a black jumpsuit. If Hitoshi was honest, he wanted to wear one too. It did look comfy. The man had a kind of scarf around his neck. Then it hit Hitoshi. The man, lying in front of the classroom door, was Fing Eraserhead. Hello, I'm Shota Aizawa. Your teacher. It was kind of funny how almost every student in the room let out an collective, huh, but he couldn't say much. He was as shocked at them. For a different reason though. His absolute favorite hero and a total badass on the field just told them he was teaching them this year. Right, let's get to it. Put these on and head outside, their new teacher drawled before pulling gym uniforms out of practically nowhere and throwing them on his desk. So cool was the only thought Hitoshi had in his head while taking a uniform and rushing out the classroom. He saw the green-haired boy hurrying out a few seconds earlier. If he hurried up he could catch up and test his theory. Izuku was the first one to arrive at the changing room. It wasn't too surprising when he thought about the way he practically sprinted out of the classroom. He was pretty sure he saw the hot indigo-haired boy in the back of the classroom, but Ida cornered him before he got a good look in. After Izuku finished changing, he was a pretty fast changer. The indigo-haired teen entered. The guy was looking at Izuku with a sort of contemplation that had Izuku's anxiety ticking up. I really like black cats and just yesterday saw one with a white scarf. The indigo-haired boy murmured. Izuku's eyes widened. The hot guy he was thinking about since the practical and Hitoshi were one and the same. Hitoshi? Izuku asked just to make sure. Possible Hitoshi looked up at him, a victorious grin on his face. I knew it, you're Izuku. He just blinked at Hitoshi, his brain trying to think of something that could have given him away, only to come out empty. How did you know? Well, my fellow bully victim, I can see trough your tricks. Izuku let out a short laugh. His only on caffeine and spite-working brain did not have enough brain power to get any of that, but so be it. Hitoshi changed fast and before any other of their classmates entered they were already outside, waiting for their peers to finish changing. The acknowledgement nod they got from Aizawa-sensei was enough dopamine for the whole week. 10 whole minutes later and the others were standing besides them. Look on Aizawa-sensei's face gave both boys goosebumps. Now that y'all are finally here we can start. You will be doing an quirk assessment test. Aizawa-sensei turned his back to them, not even bothering to. A quirk assessment test? The whole class said at once. But orientation. We're gonna miss it. If you really want to make the big leagues you can't waste time on pointless ceremonies. Here at UDA we're not tethered to traditions. The man turned his head to look back at them, a bored look on Hyu's face. That means that I get to run my class however I see fit. You've been taking standardized tests most of your lives. But you never got to use your quirks in physical exams before. Aizawa holds some kind of dashboard up while speaking, now turning his whole body in their direction. The country is still trying to pretend we're all created equal by not letting those with the most power excel. It's not rational. Izuku flinched at that. He knew the underground hero didn't mean that the quirkless persons are useless, but it still hurt to hear these words from his hero. He could see Toshi giving him a worried look from the edge of his vision, but he just waved him off. His friend knew about his real quirk. Izuku was fast to tell him after the both bounded over insomnia and dark jokes. One day the Ministry of Education will learn. Bakugo, the worn-out man said, turning in the boy's direction. You managed to get the most points in the practical exam. Mostly every one of his new classmates immediately turned to Bakugo with awe in their eyes. Izuku wanted to puke, having so many people look at Bakugo like that was just disgusting. He felt like when his coffee machine explodes in his face and he had to clean everything without the coffee. Truly a tragedy. What was your farthest softball throw in junior high? 67 meters, I think. Izuku and Hitoshi exchanged a look. The way Bakugo said that was so arrogant. Izuku really wished his crush friend would brainwash Bakugo into doing the chicken dance. He snickered quietly at that thought, only to receive a look from his new homeroom teacher. Right? The man drawled, try doing it with your quirk. Anything goes, just stay in the circle. Right? The man drawled, try doing it with your quirk. Anything goes, just stay in the circle. All right, Bakugo said, smirk evident in his voice, you asked for it. Go on, Aizawa grumbled, you're wasting time. Bakugo scowled at that before he swung his arm back, fingers curled tightly around the ball before hurling the ball forward and letting go at the top with his iconic die. With the biggest explosion Izuku ever saw Bakugo making, the ball flew so far that Izuku was wondering if it would come back and hit him in the head from behind. All of you need to know your maximum capabilities. It's the most rational way to figuring out your potential as a pro hero. The man said while holding up the dashboard thingy from the start. It had the number 705.2 written on it in big fat letters. Q, gasp number whatever. Really, Izuku just didn't understand what the others saw in Bakugo. Sure, the guy had a great quirk and could throw some softball pretty far. But that didn't make him a great person nor hero. Whoa, 705 meters, are you kidding me? Some guy with a bold in his yellow hair exclaimed. This seems fun, I want to try next, a pink-colored girl cheered. Izuku already knew they messed up with that, but the feeling only worsened when he saw the look on Oboro's face. So this looks fun, huh? You have 3 years here to become a hero. You think it's all gonna be games and playtime? Aizawa-sensei let a grin form on his face and Izuku felt the hair on his neck rising. Idiots! Today you'll compete in 8 different tests to gauge your potential. Whoever comes in last has none and will be expelled immediately. An exclamation of, huh, could be heard from every student, even the ones that seemed absolutely composed at the start of Aizawa's rant. Oh, we're effed, he whispered to Hitoshi, who nodded solemnly in response and turned to Izuku. Listen, when one of us gets expelled, the other stays at U.A and teaches the one that got expelled what he learned, and we're gonna be vigilantes together, yeah? Izuku felt a grin spread on his face and he put his fist out for Toshi to fist bump. Bet? He could feel his face heating up at the matching grin on his friend's face. He did not have a crush, no sir. Like I said, I get to decide how this class runs. Hitoshi and Izuku both looked back towards their teacher when he continued, understand. The grin on their teacher's face made Izuku shiver and he grabbed his friend's hand, squeezing it lightly. The reassuring little he got in response made something in his insides feel warm and tingly. If that's a problem, you can head home right now, the man announced, sounding a little too excited for Izuku's liking. When Izuku looked around, he could see different stages of determination in his peers' eyes, some seemingly shining a vibrant color. He actually flinched at the look in his bully's eyes, even though he knew if he really wanted to, the guy would be 6 feet under in seconds. You can't send one of us home, the bubbly girl he saved during the entrance exam called out. W just got here. Even if it wasn't the first day, this isn't fair. Izuku could hear Toshi wince beside him. Oh, and you think natural disasters are? Or power-hungry villains? HM? Aizawa questioned, voice warning, or catastrophic accidents that wipe out whole cities. No, the world is full of unfairness. Izuku nodded his head at that. It was true, they just had to look at the way people discriminate against others and it was clear. It's a hero's job to try to combat that unfairness. If you're gonna be a pro, you have to push yourself to the brink. Izuku exchanged a determined look with Hitoshi, converting his feelings without speaking. It brought a small smile to Izuku's face when he thought about the fact the two met the first time in person today. For the next 3 years, UA is gonna throw one hardship after another at you. So go beyond plus ultra style, Aizawa drawled before grinding this grin again. Show me it's no mistake you're here. Now then, dash, their teacher sighed. We're just wasting time by talking, let the games begin. 50-meter dash. Izuku wouldn't be using his quirk, he knew that much, and Toshi couldn't really make use of his in the 50-meter dash either. Lucky for them, they both took their time to train their bodies before coming to U.A, so they were pretty confident to be somewhere over average. Ida Tanya, who Izuku now recognized as Ingenium's little brother, was the winner in that challenge, while the lat one was the invisible girl. Both he and Hitoshi were in the middle in the rang list. Both were fine with that, they didn't want much attention anyways, as long as they didn't get last they were satisfied. Grip strength. Izuku stared at his classmate with 4 arms. The guy had 540 kilograms with one hand. Izuku managed 67 kilograms while Hitoshi had 64 kilograms. Both were good result for teens their age. The last one was the guy with the naval laser quirk, which wasn't too surprising considering he depended quite heavily on his quirk. Standing long jump. This time a girl with black hair used her quirk to make a jetpack and won, while the invisible girl lost again. Izuku and Toshi were both average again. The way it was going, they wouldn't have to worried about vigilante laws. Repeated side steps. This time it was actually mostly similar results. The only difference was the girl with the black ponytail. She had made some sort of trampoline on both sides of her and jumped between them. And there was a boy Izuku had a bad feeling about. He was clearly making the girls uncomfortable, but he at least used his quirk creative in this assignment. He had put his hairball down and jumped between them. Probably an idea stolen from the ponytail girl. Ball throw. This was the exercise Izuku was most excited about. He really wanted to know how all his classmates would use their quirks, and he knew for a fact that Hitoshi had a plan. After the bubbly brunette got an infinite score, Izuku watched as Toshi walked into the circle ball in an iron grip in hand. His eyes widened when his friend turned to Aizawa-sensei and asked if anything goes as long as he stays in the circle. What is his plan? That's what I said, his teacher answered, a gleam in his eyes that Izuku couldn't quite pinpoint. Then the absolute idiot turned to Bakugo and threw the ball at the other boy's head with such a force that Izuku was worried the ball would hit Bakugo. The explosive boy growled and used his explosion to direct the ball back in Toshi's direction. It flew quiet the bit before the score display thingy got his attention with a beeping noise. 706.3 m. Izuku had to forcefully close his mouth. Izuku knew Toshi did that because he hoped Bakugo wouldn't react in time, otherwise he could have used his quirk to make the Infinity Girl use her quirk on the ball. With a victorious smirk, Hitoshi waltzed over to him, confidence oozing from every inch of his body. Izuku took a deep breath in before walking into the circle. He was the last one and everyone was looking. Listen to me, Izuku, Oboro's excited voice rang out. Do exactly what I do and the ball will fly the best it can without using a quirk. Izuku nodded the slightest bit, no need for anyone to get suspicious, before looking at Oboro who had appeared in front of him. He lifted his arm to the exact angle Oboro was doing before swinging it forward with as much strength as he could. He let go of the softball at the highest point, pointer finger leaving last, and the ball flew. 73 m. The score display thingy showed, making Izuku cheer in his head. One grateful look in Oboro's, and one excited grin in Hitoshi's direction later, and he was standing with the rest of his class staring at the big scoreboard that would show the final scores soon. Yairzu Momo, Todoroki Shoto, Bakugo Ketsuki, Ida Tenya, Tokoyami Fumikage, Shoji Mizo, Ojiro Mashireo, Midoriya Izuku, Kirishima Ijiro, Shinso Hitoshi, Ashiro Mina, Uchako Uraraka, Kudakoji, Satoru Kidako, Ashutsu, Ryuma Yuga, Shiro Hanta, Kaminari Denki, Jiro Kyoka, Hagakure, Mineta Minoru. Izuku high-fived Toshi. They were exactly where they wanted to be, in the middle of the rankings. Not too much attention but good enough for their sensei not to expel them anytime soon. Izuku high-fived Toshi. They were exactly where they wanted to be, in the middle of the rankings. Not too much attention but good enough for their sensei not to expel them anytime soon. Izuku paused, remembering that there would still be someone that got expelled, and looked over everyone's reactions. When he saw the creep from the repeated side steps crying, he felt not even an ounce of sympathy. He still decided to cheer him up a little. Before he could even take one step in the direction of the little pervert, their new sensei spoke up. Minoru Mineta, please follow me to Nisa's office after class is over. Also, nobody but two people seemed to show any empathy to him. Empathy is an important ability in heroes, the man lectured. Izuku's eyes locked with Toshi's, both knowing the other was the second person to show empathy. Later that day, when Hitoshi and Izuku were walking home, they found out they were almost neighbors. Izuku remembered he hadn't told Toshi about Nugget yet. Hey Toshi, he asked, voice soft. Hitoshi just hummed as answer. I found a cat. The moment the word cat left Izuku's mouth, his friend froze and turned to him with an excited gleam in his eyes. Where is it? A girl, a boy? What's their name? Izuku chuckled, tugging his friend into the next alleyway. No need to have anyone listening in. So it's a she. I named her Nugget and she's... He paused for a second, thinking over his words. Well, Hitoshi prompted, looking at him wearily. She's dead, Izuku sighed. His friend looked at him dumbfounded. After a little staring, Nugget let out a soft mew before jumping on Hitoshi's head. The boy paused and stared at Izuku with wide eyes, who stared back with equally wide eyes. Is that Nugget? Hitoshi asked. Well, yeah, but ghosts normally can't touch living beings, he mumbled, surprised. Hitoshi just nodded slowly before an excited gleam entered his eyes. Maybe it's her quirk, he mused. Yeah. A voice sounded behind Izuku, who jumped before turning around. finding Oboro behind him. "How are you always where I am?" Izuku whined. Turning around to look at Hitoshi, he gave him an apologetic smile. "It's Oboro. Anyways, can you see Nugget or just feel her? Can you hear her? How does it feel? Is it cold or warm or just pressure?" "Izuku," his friend interrupted him, amusement clear in his voice. "I love your analyses, but I can't follow your mumbling." Izuku blushed at that. Trying to ignore Oboro's knowing chuckle, he nodded and asked one question at a time instead. After Hitoshi answered all his questions, they continued walking, stopping at Toshi's home. "Wanna come in? My parents won't have a problem with it," he asked, a look of pure hope in his eyes. Izuku hesitated for a moment before seeing Oboro giving him thumbs up. He shrugged and grinned slightly at Hitoshi. "Sure thing if you're sure your parents are fine with it." Hitoshi nodded before walking up the stairs to his front door, opening it and stepping inside. Izuku hesitated before walking in behind him. Izuku could feel a giddy smile entering his face when he saw the amount of childhood pictures from Hitoshi. He looked at his friend before walking up to the nearest one. "You were such a cute kid," Izuku announced, turning a cheeky grin in Hitoshi's direction, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. "Were?" the boy asked. "Aren't I many more?" "Nah," Izuku answered, "you're more handsome than cute now." Izuku froze up, realizing what he just said, and stared at Hitoshi, feeling the heat slowly rising into his cheeks. He groaned, head in his hands. He looked up when he heard laughing, only to see that not only Oboro but also Yoichi were laughing at him. When he heard a female voice laughing from the door to the living room, he turned his head, body filled with dread, to see a woman with the same lilac hair as Hitoshi's pulled up in a ponytail. "Hey, you must be the kid Hitoshi's talking about for a while now." "I'm Shinso Kyoko, call me Kyoko, I'm his mother," the woman exclaimed, holding her hand out for Izuku to take. "Midoriya, Izuku's fine. Pleasure to meet you," he said, taking her hand with a polite smile. "So," Hitoshi interrupted, "I'm handsome?" Izuku groaned, feeling his just cooled down cheeks heat up again. He could hear Yoichi chuckling again. "I'm gonna go get Nana," the ghost announced before evaporating in thin air. "I mean, yeah," Izuku mumbled. "Have you ever looked at yourself?" "Smooth," Oboro grinned, floating over Kyoko's head. Izuku took great pleasure in the fact that a slight blush grew on Hitoshi's face. "Stop flirting and come in," Kyoko teased, taking a step to the side and shooing them into the living room. "We're not flirting," the boys cried out at the same time, earning another chuckle from the woman. Just then Nana and Yoichi appeared on the couch next to Izuku, Nana smirking knowingly at him. "You're down bad, kiddo." Izuku glared at her but otherwise ignored her comment. "So how was the first day?" the lilac-haired woman asked, sounding excited to hear about it. The boys started to tell her everything, getting sidetracked with fanboying about Eraserhead. At some point the ghosts vanished again, leaving Izuku alone with his not crush and his mother. "Sounds like you two had an exciting first day. Good that I made a lot of ramen," Kyoko announced, standing up and vanishing into the kitchen. When she came back, Izuku nearly drooled at the sight of the ramen. They had cat-themed eggs and were smelling too delicious for Izuku's still hungry stomach. He hadn't eaten the whole day, and the growl his stomach let out had Hitoshi smirking at him. They ate together, holding a small conversation the whole time. When the meal was over, Izuku, despite the protest, helped cleaning the dishes and then vanished with Hitoshi in the boys' room. "Let the door open," Kyoko shouted up to them, getting groans from the boys in response. The rest of the day was spent with playing video games. Hitoshi was sure Izuku was cheating somehow and talking about everything and nothing. Izuku felt his body fill with dread when he looked at the time. He would have to leave soon, or he wouldn't be able to hide his bruises in school the next day. "I have to go home," Izuku uttered, hoping Hitoshi would understand without him having to explain. He had told Hitoshi about his home life a few weeks after they started chatting, and the boy was Izuku's safe space since then. The boy looked at Izuku with a worried but knowing look before nodding. "Do you want me to accompany you home?" "Nah," Izuku said, fake cheerfulness in every inch of his face. "It'll be fine, thanks though." Hitoshi looked unconvinced but still walked Izuku to the door, after Izuku said goodbye to Kyoko and thanked her for letting him stay and feeding him. When Izuku met up with Hitoshi the next day, his friend gave him a once-over before looking at him with a clear question in his eyes. "I'm fine," Izuku reassured. "She was already asleep when I came home." A relieved nod later, and they were both sitting in their class waiting for their teacher to arrive. Izuku was excited for English, and he was even more excited when Present Mike walked in. The hero was wearing his whole hero attire, and Izuku was practically vibrating with unanswered questions. "Hey little listeners. I will be your English teacher while we're in class. Please call me Mike Sensei while at school." After the first lessons were finally over, they got the best food ever from Lunch Rush. Izuku glared at every one of his ghost's friends when they started to laugh at the way he inhaled his food. Surprisingly, every ghost from Ofo was there to make fun of him that day. Normally there was always at least one staying with All Might, often only one, Yoichi or Nana, were coming to Izuku. The afternoon lessons were different. Instead of having normal lessons like math and English, they had the first heroic class. No one knew who their teacher would be, at least Izuku thought so. He didn't actually ask his classmates, and Izuku was nervous and excited at the same time. He was hoping it didn't end up being All Might. He didn't have a big problem with the man, but he wasn't a fan either. All Might probably couldn't teach for the live of him anyways. "Izuku," Hitoshi hissed when Izuku started to bounce his leg in nervousness for the 9th time. Izuku, answering cries of, "I can't help it," was droned out by a booming voice declaring, "I'm coming through the door like a regular person." The whole class erupted into uproar at the symbol of peace's entrance. His classmates were talking and screaming through each other, and Izuku could feel a migraine already pulsing behind his eyelids. He means like an attention-seeking, annoyingly loud barking, to cheerful, golden retriever? Izuku asked his friend in a whisper, turning around in his seat. Unbeknownst to them, a certain purple-haired girl choked on her spit. Hearing such things leave the innocent child's mouth, she assumed Izuku to be. "I know, right? Well, a golden retriever is much less stupid though," his friend murmured back, laugh obviously trying to escape. The symbol of peace pushed a button of a remote he got from somewhere, and the wall at the back opened up, showing suitcase after suitcase with numbers on them. "Please take the suitcase with your number and meet me in your hero costumes at ground beta," the hero instructed, leaving the room. Do all heroic teachers have the inability to show someone the way? Izuku mused to himself, a little annoyed at having to find the right way again. Izuku looked at Hitoshi, feeling the blush rising up again. It was seriously getting ridiculous how often he blushes in company of his friend. F-. With a start he realized he had been staring. He quickly turned to an amused-looking Oboro. They were all standing on training ground beta, suited in their costumes, for All Might to explain their first exercise. "They say clothes make the pros, and you student are the proof. You all look heroic in those costumes." All Might's booming voice rung out, getting their attention. "Today, he continued, you'll be doing an hero versus villain exercise." Izuku perked up at that, rolling his eyes. He would let All Might explain the exercise, but as soon as the hero finishes, Izuku will be explaining why that would be absolute stupid to his teacher who was supposed to be teaching them. His eyes catched Nana's over All Might's head, who nodded at him, obviously also not a fan of the whole hero versus villain thing. The more the hero explained, the more Izuku wanted to spit or punch him in the face. Preferably both. 5 minutes later he finally stopped talking. The man started drawing lots on who will be in a team with who, but Izuku did not have the patience to wait for after drawing lots, so he took a step forward and started talking. "All Might, with all due respect, sir," he exclaimed, voice full of a confidence he didn't know he had. "Doing such an exercise on the first day of training is stupid." He could hear the few gasped behind him, but when he glanced at Hitoshi's, the boy was wearing a proud smirk. "What do you mean?" The hero spluttered, and Izuku got the slight expression the man did not have his teaching license yet. Well, he started looking at Nana for reassurance, which he got in the form of a thumbs up, the hero versus villain thing for one. It's highly unethical to label hero students as villains. He remembered what Hitoshi told him about the treatment with a villainous quirk like his at that. He would not let anybody call his friend a villain while he could do something about it. He continued, a newfound determination making his voice louder. "And secondly, I don't think it's a good idea to let teenagers without any fighting experience fight against each other." All Might glanced to the side, rubbing his neck and looking deeply uncomfortable. Well, the man chucked before clearing his throat, what would you say we're doing then? Oboro floated next to him and whispers an idea in his ear that had Izuku grinning. He could see a few of his new classmates shivering, which only made Izuku grin a little wider. His innocent nerd persona was gone since he interrupted All Might anyways, so no need at hiding anymore. How about? Kyoko Shinso would say she is a very empathetic woman. It might be due to her quirk, empathy. It gives her the ability to see emotions around her and know who feels how. Of course it gave her a few problems as a kid, but now she's thankful to have such an awesome quirk. It helped her, when Hitoshi came home one day with bruises littering his body and emotions somewhere between anger and sadness, to know what was going on faster than she would without it. She tried talking to him when the feeling associated with school became fear and anticipation, when the only emotion her son emitted was anxiety and anger, when even the day he got the acceptance letter from UA the happiness and excitement took place to anticipation and bitterness. But her son is even more stubborn than her, and she really didn't think pushing him for answers would end good. So she let him be and hoped Hitoshi would come to her when things got worse. But empathy also let her see the changes in Hitoshi after Haruki came to celebrate with them. He was happier, and the constant fear and sadness was exchanged for happiness and excitement. She called Haruki immediately after she noticed the changes and asked him what was going on. Don't get her wrong, she was happy for her son, but she needed to know if whatever made her son so happy was dangerous. When her nephew told her that he got a number from a boy that also got into class 1, she relaxed. She also told Hitoshi to bring him home one day, only to receive an annoyed glare and I don't even know him in person from him. Well, she just has to wait till after the first day and nag Hitoshi till the boy gives her answers. The first day came to fast and to slow at the same time. Her husband wasn't there at the moment because of work, which means she was practically alone till Hitoshi came back from school. But when he came home, she immediately interrogated him about the boy he was texting with. And oh, her little boy had a crush. She was absolutely gonna tease him with that for the rest of his life. The day after was even better because the kid, Izuku, was in their home. And she could feel the adorable love the two had for each other. She really hoped they wouldn't be like she and her husband had been and confess to each other before they graduate. There was one thing though that made her worry about Izuku. It was the way he was constantly in fight or fly, how every muscle in the teen's body seemed ready to snap by the way he tensed. It was the way the boy dreaded leaving and how his smiles were always fake but so real. It reminded her of her husband. He grew up in foster care and was treated like a villain because he could use people as kind of puppets. She hated to let the boy leave, but one look at Hitoshi made her decide to not ask the greenet if he needs help. Clear. The conversation she had with Hitoshi after Izuku was gone was, to say frankly, not the best. It was filled with screaming and tears, but it ended with a promise to do anything they could to make Izuku feel comfortable with them. Shota was tired. It wasn't surprising considering he's working with a bunch of hormonal, arrogant teenagers that think just because they have some heroic quirk they are superior. He sighed and looked back, making sure the little purple-haired creep was following behind, just to see the boy weeping like his family just got killed. Seriously, what's wrong with people? He just hoped the evidence he got was enough to expel the pervert trailing behind him. When he finally reached Nisa's officer, the door opened before he could even knock. He took a beeline to his chair and flung himself down. God, he was too tired for this. He locked eyes with the kids' parents and gave them a small grin. He tried not to laugh at their faces. Really, his grin isn't even that scary. So now that the two are her, let's start, won't we? Nizu questioned, smile his face. Mr. and Mrs. Mineta, you're probably wondering why you're here. Nizu started, only to get interrupted by Mrs. Mineta. Yes, we do. Surely it must be important to call us from work. Shota could see Nizu's eye twitch before the mammal continued speaking. Like I was saying, Minoru here has continuously stared at his female peers to a point where they asked him to stop after what he started to comment on their bodies and even tried to touch them. Now surely you know about our strong anti-discrimination policy? Both parents glanced at each other before Mr. Mineta started spewing bullshit. Again. Well, I don't really see how what he is doing has anything to do with discrimination, and even when you don't have any proof. Shota was in physical pain, holding back his eye roll. Well, firstly, he's discriminatory towards the female population. Secondly, we here at Yurata will also not be teaching possible SXL abusers how to be a hero. And thirdly, we have enough proof. Shoyuta announced. Now both parents were squirming in their seats, shooting Shota dirty looks. It was almost funny to see them falling for their bluff so fast. They weren't even sure the evidence was enough. Well then, Nizu chirped, I think the best course of action is to switch your son to general education and give him ethics lessons. Of course, we could also expel him completely if you preferred that. No, Mr. Minoru grit out, general education is fine. Wonderful, Nizu announced, clapping his tiny paws together. Now that that's dealt with, you can leave. The three Minettas scrambled out of the room looking like they just made a deal with the devil, which looking at Nizu was not far off. With one pointed look from Nizu later, he was sitting in his car waiting for Zashi to come out. And? His husband asked as soon as he entered the car. Shota's responding grin was enough answer for his husband. Oh yeah. His husband celebrated his quirk cancelled out halfway through Shota. The rest of the ride home was filled with Zashi's low humming to whatever song was playing on the radio, and Shota's slight smile turned to his husband. He could see a few of his new classmates shivering, which only made Izuku grin a little wider. His innocent nerd persona was gone since he interrupted All Might anyways, so no need at hiding anymore. How about? We have to find Aizawa-sensei somewhere in the school in our hero costumes. We write down when something on our costumes doesn't work right or has the wrong aesthetic. At the end we give the notes and our costumes to his support course and let them fix if. Everyone was staring at him with a sort of frightened awe that made Izuku rethink their ability to think properly. Like, seriously, what about him was worth that look? Well, All Might started looking unsure. I must speak with young Aizawa beforehand. And with hat, the symbol of peace, left them unsupervised. Not the best idea considering they were still irresponsible teens. And to Izuku's horror, most of his classmates immediately swarmed him, asking question after question. Seriously, he knows he was pretending to be someone else before, but that were a few too many questions. With a mental call, Nugget appeared next to him. It was such a blessing to be able to speak with befriended ghosts in his mind. Hey Nugget, could you please distract them? An affirmative meow from his cat was enough to make his whole body relax. Not complete, of course. He was a kid that got abused by peers and guardian alike. What did you think? Nugget jumped down from his shoulder, where she was perched on before, and sprinted over the training's ground, getting tangible halfway through. Like predicted, most of the classmates that air bothering him before were engrossed by her and didn't register him slowly creeping away. I survived, Izuku muttered when he arrived next to Hitoshi. The monster he calls his friend laughed at his misery and patted his shoulder. It must have been awful. Thanks God you survived, he whispered back, sarcasm in his voice clear as day. At that moment All Might came back, still looking unsure. Nugget, the angle she was, jumped back onto his shoulder as soon as the attention was off of her. Young Aizawa said whoever finds him first gets a better grade in one class of choice. The hero announced. Izuku and Hitoshi exchanged a challenging look before starting to sprint, their classmates right behind them. Izuku exchanged one last look with Hitoshi before running into the left hall while Hitoshi ran into the right. I know where he is, Oboro's excited voice rung out. I thought so, Izuku nodded. How about that? You stay near Aizawa-sensei, and when someone gets too close you come back and show me where he is? Sure, good luck, Oboro exclaimed before disappearing. The rest of the day was filled with Class 1A running trough the school and searching for their teacher. Izuku was running trough halls after halls and, fighting at least 3 panic attacks due to social anxiety, run into classroom. At some point Izuku realized that there was no way their teacher, FING underground hero, would just lie in some DMN classroom. That was when he remembered the first day, with Oboro hiding in the vents, and an idea popped into his head. He climbed up into the vent, Nugget leading the way, and to no one's surprise found Aizawa lying in his bright yellow sleeping bag. Yay, you found him, not even 4 hours, Oboro said, voice utterly unimpressed. Izuku decided to ignore the ghost and instead wake Aizawa, telling Nugget to get Hitoshi. Huh, You actually found me, his teacher grumbled, voice drier than Izuku dead plants. Yep, he replied, voice opposite to Aizawa's, light. When they arrived back at ground beta, all his classmates were already there. Izuku's eyes roamed the faces to see that there were other people there as well. His mind supplied ghosts. He hadn't seen them earlier, but he could also just have been stressed. Trying his best to ignore any ghosts that were cheering for him, he would talk with them when no one was there that could judge him in any way. He continued trotting behind his sensei. His usual ghost friends seemed to get the same idea because they stopped interacting with him in any way. Even Nugget had taken to looking around. At some point, Nugget's paw touched one of the ghosts, who in response turned tangible for the time the paw was on her. Aizawa-sensei noticed. Because of course he did, he was an underground hero after all. The teacher seemed to write it off as his imagination because his suspicious expression turned into his normal, emotionless expression again. Please don't touch any ghosts till we figured out what the F just happened, he begged Nugget. The cat made eye contact with him and nodded. He nodded, before continuing strolling around the training ground. And the winner is Midoriya. His teacher's voice snapped him out of his concentrated not at ghosts looking. The whole class, plus the ghosts, were cheering and all the attention was on him. Nightmare for his antisocial but. Now, because you needed the whole day, change and go home, their sensei drawled. Everyone was gone. In an instant, because even though hero training was what they wanted, it was still pretty hard. Izuku and Hitoshi took their time moving to the changing rooms, not too keen on changing in front others. Yet technically they already did, but they were pretty fast then and nobody saw their scars. When Izuku was sure the nobody was within earshot, he leaned a little into Hiroshima space. The whole training's ground is filled with ghosts. It's like they had a break and decided to come back now. He whispered. His friend nodded in acknowledgement but didn't get to react more because they arrived at the changing rooms. After they changed, mostly alone, they walked home. Sadly, Izuku had to decline the offer to stay at Hitoshi's again, because his mom was still upset with him from yesterday. His mom was still working when he enters the apartment and Izuku vanished into his room. He really had to find out what that sheet with Nugget and the other ghost was. His mom was still working when he enters the apartment and Izuku vanished into his room. He really had to find out what that sheet with Nugget and the other ghost was. Oboro, Yoichi, Nana, can someone of you come to my room? Izuku was again so FNG thankful for this part of his quirk. Just 5 minutes after he asked, Oboro and Nana were floating into his room. Hey Squirt, you called? Nana asked, floating over his bed in a sitting position. Yeah. Did you saw how Nugget touched that ghost? The two ghosts exchanged confused looks before shaking their heads. She touched one of the ghosts and they got tangible for the time Nugget was touching them, Izuku explained. The ghost's eyes widened comically wide and their head whipped to Nugget, who was laying on Izuku's desk chair. Nugget looked up and blinked sluggishly at them before trotting over to Izuku, plopping herself on his lap. Nugget, I want you to touch Oboro till I tell you to stop, and afterwards do the same with Nana. Nugget walked up to Oboro and jumped on his shoulder. The ghost immediately turned tangible. Izuku let Nugget know to change the person and his cat didn't waste a second before jumping on Nana's head. The past OFA user also turned tangible and Nugget jumped, on request of Izuku, back down and snuggled onto his lap. Huh, Oboro let out, sounding dumbfounded. Izuku nodded mutely and started to do a few more tests. They found out 7 things. As long as Nugget was in physical contact with the ghost, they would get tangible. She could turn it off too. The ghosts could still float. Izuku could use Nugget's quirk to make a ghost tangible for a certain amount of time without having to touch them the whole time, max 5 minutes for now. It did not have any drawbacks for Nugget, but that she has to constantly touch the ghost. Izuku would get a bad migraine and get dizzy using the quirk. It felt like a slight breeze inside of him. The last one was mostly for Izuku, but it was good to know anyways. The next day when Izuku came to school, he was surrounded by reporters. Hitoshi was standing at the sidelines going unnoticed by the reporters. With one last look towards the crowd, Izuku was standing beside his friend. So what's the plan? Izuku required. Not sure. I was thinking about turning around and leaving, Hitoshi deadpanned. Izuku considered this for a while before shaking his head. Can't. It's just the third day of school, I don't feel like getting expelled. His friend let out the most exhausted sigh Izuku had ever heard in his shitty life. Izuku grabbed Hitoshi's hand and asked Nana to give them her quirk. The had-been hero immediately high-fives Izuku, and the boys were floating high enough to not be registered by either the cameras or reporters. They landed on the other side of the door, trying to avoid as many cameras as possible. When they arrived in class, they still had about 5 minutes till the start of the class. Hitoshi used this time to take a nap while Izuku used the telepathy aspect of his quirk to talk with a few of the ghosts that were floating around. They were surprised but understood the problem and didn't talk with Izuku directly. It was good because that way Izuku could pretend to sleep. He befriended 3 ghosts in the time Aizawa needed to get into class. And the things he found out. Let's just say he hoped Endeavor, Mount Lady and Death Arms would not PSS him off. He had the skill of analyses and hacking on his side, and most ghosts would happily lend him their quirks. One of the ghosts, Hikaru, died at the hands of Endeavor. The other one was left to die by Death Arms, their name is Nico. And the last one was a victim to the rubble of a heroes versus villain fight between Mount Lady and Berserker, and said their name is Chisame. Even though the villain was nothing more than a F-rank villain, Mount Lady decided to intervene the perfectly fine going fight. While she was in it, she did really bad collateral damage which ended in a whole apartment building collapsing. Izuku knew there were more corruption in the HPSC, but Izuku couldn't do much at the moment. He would get Nizu into the boat when he has enough evidence, but for now he will concentrate on the 3 heroes that hurt his new friends. Lunchtime came faster than expected, but considering that Izuku loved learning, it probably shouldn't have been that unexpected. He also got FING class president. He was not happy about that. He was an antisocial, sassy, sleep-deprived teen. Not class president material. After lunch he will look if he could maybe give the position to someone else, Ida for example. He and Hitoshi were sitting on a small table and glared at everyone who dared to even look in their direction. It seemed to work well. Not even Uraraka or Ida were coming to them. It was pretty comfortable till an alarm blared. Because why would anything ever be comfortable? Warning level 3 security breach. Please evacuate the building in an orderly fashion. A robotic voice sounded. The whole cafeteria was filled with panicked teens in an instant. No matter where Izuku looked, someone was standing there, pushing and pulling to get out the fastest. People, he shook his head. H really didn't like people. At some point, Izuku ended up on the other side of the cafeteria, pressed against a window. His eyes fell onto a figure stepping away from a disintegrated door. That's not good, Oboro mumbled beside him, nearly giving Izuku a heart attack. The boy could only nod and hope for the best. He would tell Aizawa of his discovery, but first he had to get back to class. The chaos had somehow dissolved while he was staring at the dust. That was once U.A's door. Back in the classroom, the only thing his classmates seemed to talk about was how the reporters managed to activate the alarm. It took every will strength he had not to start laughing at their naive little thoughts. There is not even a possibility that Nizu would allow reporters to activate the alarm. Not at UA. Hitoshi was sending him questioning looks for the whole 3 minutes. He was silently lagging at his classmates. Izuku gave him a look that screamed, "Not now." The lilac-haired teen seemed to destined Izuku M, because he turned in his seat and waited for Aizawa. When the hero was finally there, Izuku took his change and walked to the front, not even glancing at his teacher. "I want to revoke my position as class president and give it to Ida," he announced, voice strong and unwavering. The room fell into a stunned silence before the screaming started. Thanks to whatever god there was, the class seemed to be on his side. From what he could gather from all the chaotic screaming, the wannabe Sonic was the one who cleared the chaos in the cafeteria. With a tired nod, their teacher accepted the change of position and started the lesson. At some point, Nico had started floating above Izuku's head. They were floating on their back like some lazy devil, telling stories after stories. Izuku had enough blackmail on all of the teacher trough the ghosts alone that he wasn't even too angry with Nico for disrupting his concentration. After the class was finally over and he could escape Bakugo's glares and insults, he walked up to the teacher's desk. He had originally planned to tell the teachers the next day during lunch break, but after seeing his sensei so on edge, he decided to get it over with. Aizawa-sensei, he called when his teacher didn't react even after at least 3 minutes of him standing beside his bright yellow sleeping bag. The underground hero turned in his sleeping bag and stared up at him. It was a little weird to get stared at by a homeless-looking man in a sleeping bag, but Izuku ignored it. With one last glance at Hitoshi, who was waiting at the door, he began to explain his observations. So, if I get this right, you saw a sketchy person walking away from the disintegrated door? His teacher asked, after Izuku finished, worry clear in his voice. The boy nodded, suddenly a little nervous. He wasn't used to adults believing him. Could you come to the teacher's lounge tomorrow so we can talk about it in more depth? The man asked. With another nod, he was dismissed and left with Hitoshi, telling him all the details. The other boy was listening to him, adding his own thoughts here and there. It was all fine till Izuku got a call. With wide eyes and continuous paling face, he saw the caller ID. His friend looked over his shoulder and put an arm over Izuku's shoulder to comfort him. With a grateful smile, Izuku took the call. Where the f are you? I told you to clean the effin' house, why is it still not clean? The woman spat before her voice turned teary. How can you do this to your poor mother? Am I nothing to you? Don't you know what I've been trough because of you? Izuku was gritting his teeth. He had grabbed Hitoshi's hand from around shoulders when Inko had started to speak and was squeezing it hard enough to bruise. Hitoshi didn't pay attention to the pain in his hand, too worried about his best friend. I'm sorry, Mothmother. Izuku murmured back, the slight stutter on the word mother not going unnoticed by anyone. I thought you stopped that pathetic stuttering habit of yours, the woman hissed, getting answered with a slight whimper from Izuku. The boy hated himself for getting scared by the woman, but he couldn't help it. Nugget, still sitting around his neck, was cuddling him and pawing at his face. She could most likely feel Izuku's emotions and tried to cheer him up. After a few more insults, his mother hung up. With a tired sigh, Izuku let himself fall into Hitoshi, cuddling to his chest. You know you can always stay at mine, his friend muttered, not daring to speak any louder and break the soft atmosphere the two were in. Izuku hummed but didn't address the subject any further. It was clear that the boy didn't have the energy for more emotional shit at the moment. After staying in the position for a while and Izuku had calmed down from the call a little, they continued on their way, Hitoshi leaving Izuku hesitantly at Hitoshi's house. There you are, you failure of a child. His mother's voice assaulted him the moment he entered the house. He didn't dare lift his head, not wanting to see the disgusted, hateful look on his mother's face. Go clean up and then leave my house, the woman hissed. Izuku jerked his head in the form of a nod and hurried past the devil, trying hard not to sass her in any way. It was still his coping mechanism and the thing he did when stressed. After Izuku had cleaned the whole house, he ran out of the door, not even taking the time to pick a bag. He didn't know where he was going, he just wanted to be somewhere away from that woman. When Izuku's tears had calmed down and he could see clearly again, he started to recognize the house he went to. It wasn't hard to figure out why his distressed mind had brought him here. After about 15 minutes standing there and overthinking the situation, he finally got the courage to knock. He immediately wanted to turn around and leave when the lights turned on, indicating the person was probably already ready to end the day. Izuku, a surprised female voice sounded when the door opened, stepping to the side to let the boy enter. I told you could stay here for a bit, a lilac-colored boy reassured Izuku. And you'll never be a burden for needing a place to stay at till the monster who calls herself Mother leaves for a while again. Another voice, female this time, spoke up. Izuku nodded, not looking convinced. A light sigh came from the entry of the living room. Izuku's head snapped in the direction, his eyes meeting a gravity-defying haired man. The man's eyes widened before he turned a confused look to his wife. The woman smiled slightly before standing up and leading the man in the corridor. Hitoshi, now that they were alone, turned back to his first-ever friend. Hey Izuku, are you sure you're okay? It's okay to not be okay for a bit, but talking about it might help. The other boy looked at him for a second, expression tired. I'll tell you later, was the only answer Hitoshi got before his parents walked back in. His father with a strained expression on his face. Hi Izuku, I'm Hitoshi's father. I heard you and him are good friends, the man said. Izuku nodded and gave the man a tight smile back. If you don't want me here I can leave, Izuku mumbled. The man's eyes widened and he looked at his wife, visibly panicking for help. Izuku, honey, can you look at me? Izuku looked up. Nobody here wants you to go, we're just a little worried, that's all, the woman explained. Izuku chewed on his lip in thought before nodding his head again. Okay. The adults exchanged looks over the boy's head. Kyoko had never seen Izuku so quiet, and Sumi, Hitoshi's father, was convinced the kid was a talkative and cheerful person from what his wife told him. It was worrying to see him so down. Hitoshi let out a sigh. He knew the boy could get like that sometimes. Hitoshi was getting Izuku trough the bad days for God's sake. It didn't make him any less worried every time it happens though. Will you stay here for tonight? Sumi asked, voice soft. The green-haired boy nodded slowly, obviously not happy with the idea of burdening them in any way, but aware of the position he was in. The rest of the day was used by the two boys talking. Izuku was recalling the events that had played out at his house, and Hitoshi was trying not to go over to Izuku's and kill a beach. At some point Hitoshi even managed to make Izuku laugh. It was a huge improvement from the boy's depressed state before. At the time they were eating dinner, Izuku was back to his cheerful self again, chatting with the family and eating the food. The two adults were smiling to themselves when the two boys insisted on doing the dishes together. They were so helplessly in love it was almost sad. The next morning came faster than anyone had expected, and the next problem with it. Hitoshi, I need my school things. A young, male voice rang trough the house, having the two coffee-addicted insomniacs that just woke up in the house groaning. You can use a few things of Hitoshi. We bought everything twice in case something happens, Kyoko offered. Izuku, relieved beyond sheet, gave the woman a bright smile and started to pack his school bag, Nugget making things harder by hiding the labels from his sight. Hey dude, what are you doing? Someone asked behind Izuku, making him jump. I told you not to scare me like that, Izuku hissed back, and I'm packing my bag. The cloud ghost laughed and started to annoy Izuku for the rest of the morning. When it was time to leave, Kyoko gave both boys lunch and a kiss on the forehead. Izuku, who never had anyone giving him a goodbye kiss or lunch before, stared at the woman dumbfounded. The two Shintos laughed at his confusion before Hitoshi started to drag Izuku away. The next day in school was annoyingly hard for Izuku. The boy had problems concentrating and got the urge to start bawling his eyes out from time to time. Sure, he was feeling a lot better with the help of the shinsis, but it didn't change the fact that Inko had literally thrown him out just yesterday. He wasn't sure what his future would look like, but it didn't seem good. I mean, sure, he could always stay with Hitoshi, but he also didn't want to live with him in fear of Hitoshi getting tired of him. He couldn't deny it any longer. He was in love with him. Hitoshi was shooting him worried looks. It was greatly appreciated to know someone cared about him, but Izuku also couldn't handle the guilt. It was normal to be down from day to day, but he hated making others worry for him. When lunchtime finally arrived, he stood up, eyes locking with Hitoshi's. He was anxious as F-, his nerves being annoyingly bad today because of the event from yesterday and now the talk with teachers. It's not like he's scared, he just doesn't trust adults that much, especially teachers. When they both arrived in front of the teacher's lounge, Izuku got comfort from the weight of Nugget on his shoulders. The boy raised his shaking fist to knock. It was obvious that the force behind the knock wouldn't be enough to get the teacher's attention, so Hitoshi knocked for them instead. Izuku hated the worried looks he got from the boy. He didn't like it when people worried, it made him feel shitty. It's not like he's the only one suffering, and others have it worse, so there was no need to worry about him, of all people. The door opened, and a cheerful-looking present Mike stood there in his hero attire. Hey ya, little listeners, he cheered, come in and enter the hero's den. Izuku appreciated that the man was trying to ignore the tension that was no doubt clear. It was a good little change in scenery, not getting looked at with concern. He did appreciate the concern, it just wasn't what he needed. What he needed was normality. With a polite nod, the boys stepped into the room, Izuku's eyes immediately roaming the room for escape routes and possible weapons. It was a habit he learned from living with his mum. She would sometimes get home drunk and, let's just say, Izuku did not feel like dying by the hands of his mother. His eyes fell onto Oboro, who was floating over Mike. Hi, kiddo, heard yesterday was rough, the ghosts greeted. Izuku nodded a little in response. It's fine though the Shinsis let me stay with them. That's good to hear. The concern was clear in the ghost's voice. It was a short conversation, but Izuku was content with it. He wasn't sure how much mental capacity he had to talk over the bond. It takes energy that Izuku didn't have, and he needed enough energy for his mouth-to-brain filter, or he would start exposing his living situation. Before Izuku could start overthinking it even more, his teacher cleared his throat. With a start, Izuku realized he must have zoned out for a little. You zoned out there for a bit, kiddo, Mike confirmed unknowingly, voice kind and gentle. Izuku, with the not fear of teachers he had, bowed down and mumbled a soft sorry. Nah, you're fine, Snipe jumped in, we're all zoning out from time to time. Izuku nodded and took a deep breath to prepare for the information he found on the man who walked away from the gate. When he managed that, he didn't even know. So I found a little thing about the guy that walked away from the disintegrated gates. He started, voice clear. The teachers all looked at him with various degrees of surprise and suspicion. It wasn't unexpected. They probably all thought he would say something like, I couldn't see much, but it was a guy, and that's it. Not Izuku though. No, Izuku will overachieve and collect all the information he can possibly get and more. The guy's name is Shigaraki Tamura, and he doesn't exist. The room immediately erupted into chatter. Yeah, that was probably not the best way to explain his findings. Silent. His homeroom teacher's voice rang out, silencing the room immediately. All the papers and documents stopped at the time he was about 5 years old. Shigaraki is a persona. Izuku paused, sitting down on the couch, with Hitoshi sitting down beside him. When he looked up at all the teachers, he could see his 3 new friends hovering in poses that spoke of comfort. I dug a little deeper into him and found out about his real identity. But because I'm too tired to explain everything, only for y'all to forget I wrote it on these sheets. He announced, giving them around. The teachers looked at him with stunned expressions before looking down at the papers. Izuku gave them a little while reading them before he started talking again. I also found out why he disintegrated the door to begin with. You could see the curiosity in every single one of them, but Izuku could also see the distrust hidden beneath. He was just the distraction. I'm sure if you look, something was stolen. My best guess is a lesson plan or student list. The teachers exchanged looks before Aizawa stood up and looked through the documents that were openly displayed. It's All Might's lesson plan, the man announced 5 minutes later, and Izuku heard Nico gasp. Men, that's better than cinema. Hikaru laughed, getting agreements from the other 2. It's not funny, Oboro hissed, which only resulted in a heated discussion. Izuku sighed and tuned the ghosts out. He would deal with it later. Thank you, Midoriya, Hound Dog thanked. We will be talking about how you got the information later, but for now, go back to class. Izuku took the dismissal as what it was and went back to class, fingers intertwined with Hitoshi's. He was anxious, give him a break. The sheet Izuku gave the teachers. Name, Tenko Shimura. Alias, Tamura Shigaraki. Age, 20. Mother, now Shimura, deceased. Father, Kotaro Shimura, deceased. Sibling S, Hana Shimura. Occupation, villain. Affiliation, and quirk, decay. Quirk analyses. Type, emitter activation, 5-finger contact. Description. Decay allows the user to disintegrate everything they touch with all 5 fingers, whether organic or not. It seems like the quirk takes the liquid from the target, which gives the user dry skin. Questions. How fast can it spread? Does it spread from one target to the other? Is the user able to stop the decay process? How well is it controlled? How fast is the time between getting touched and the start of decay? Weakness. Requires physical touch to be activated. Ineffective if the user doesn't have 5 fingers, body might change activation requirements. Can be countered by destroying the affected area before it can continue spreading. Can recoil and damage the user if the user doesn't have full control. Ineffective against intangible targets. How to defeat. Cut off fingers or hand. Put on gloves. If used on your cut of the affected limb. Make the user touch himself with 5 fingers. Use range attacks. Needs more information for more accurate analyses. Note. Is thought to have died with whole family after their house was found disintegrated and bloody. From my research, I can confidently say he killed his family and became a villain afterwards. Reason still unknown. Chapter text. Izawa stormed into the principal's office, manners overtaken by righteous fury. He knew that creature born from the devil himself knew about the kid's skills. The rat always knew everything about everyone. Oh my, Shoyuta, what brings you to me? The mammal leaned forward, amusement clear in his eyes. You know why I'm here. I want whatever you know about Midoriya. Then Izawa paused for a bit, remembering the explosive kid with obvious anger issues, and when we're already on it, I need the Bakugo kid in anger management and possibly therapy. The principal looked surprised for a second before a grin broke out. Why, if I might ask, do you think Bakugo needs therapy? The rat questioned. Izawa knew he was getting tested. The mammal knew better than anyone else about the lives of his students. Hell, he probably knew more than they knew themselves. The sludge villain, he answered anyway, voice dry and tired. Nizu nodded and pushed the enter key on his keyboard. Ah, Izawa thought, he already wrote the emails. Well, now that this is out of the way, let's talk about Midoriya, Nizu requested, looking at Izawa with something akin to a raised eyebrow if the chimera had any. He will never be able to raise an actual eyebrow, Izawa thought dryly. The kid had more information on the man than legally possible. Either the kid knows how to require informational, not so legal himself, or he is involved with not so good people, Izawa explained. With a hum, Nizu started to tap away on his keyboard, not pausing once to think about what he should type. He gets them himself, seems like the boy learned how to hack. Very interesting, the rat muttered. Izawa sat there absolutely done with life. Of course, he would know how to hack. Of course, the quirkless child that somehow used a quirk was similar to his dead friends in the entrance exam. Nizu, Izawa practically growled, making the rat, with his information engrossed, turn to him. I want to know how the kid can use quirks while being quirkless and how he found information on someone he saw one time through a FING screen. Nizu grinned up at Izawa. I wish I knew, he purred. Izawa could feel his hair graying. He really didn't like that. Shotaya, his husband groaned, throwing himself over the couch like a dead fish. Stop ignoring me, why are you in such a bad mood? With a sigh, Izawa turned his attention towards the only person he loved more than coffee because he didn't want to die strongly enough already. Izuku Midoriya was the only thing he told his Zashi. The man made an O shape with his mouth, before a curious gleam entered his eyes. What did Nizu say? Izawa was totally not questioning his choice in man right now, nope. He doesn't know how the kid managed to get the information. The only thing he knows is that he must have hacked to get them. Oh. Hizashi looked down for a single second before his eyes filled with this energetic shine again. And what about the quirk usage? And Bakugo? His husband inquired. Bakugo will go to anger management and therapy. About the quirk thing, Izawa pushed, not knowing. How exactly he was supposed to tell his husband that not even Nizu, the god of knowledge, knew how Midoriya managed it. Well, he doesn't know either. The gasp his husband let out told Izawa that he understood the weight behind that. We need to talk with the little listener, his wonderful, kind-hearted and annoyingly right husband stated confidently. Izawa just groaned and smashed his head into the coffee table, hoping it would knock him out. It didn't. I'll talk to him after the USJ, Izawa grumbled. Zashi cleared his throat in a clear threat. Izawa corrected, looking into the satisfied face of Hizashi. Izuku was anxious. He didn't even know what made him that anxious, but he had the feeling something bad was going to happen. He couldn't even share his nerves with Hitoshi because his friend went to the cafe to get them a coffee. Calm your horses, man. Hikaru mumbled, your anxious energy steals my vibes. Izuku shook his head in disappointment. He loved his friend, he really did. But sometimes they could be a little annoying. Hikaru especially. He's right, you know, Nico stated. Could you kindly shut up? Kindly no, Kudo replied. It's too much fun to annoy you. Izuku decided to ignore them for now. He didn't understand why all the ghosts decided to annoy him, especially since it was really unusual for the Ofa ghosts to float into Izuku's business. Float, got it? Izuku threw his more than once flicked school bag under his desk and let himself plump into his chair. If Hitoshi didn't come from the cafe with his coffee soon, he's gonna jump out the window. Zuku, his favorite persona voice sounded from across the room. Toshi, if you didn't get coffee, don't even dare take one more step in my direction, Izuku growled, not even bothering to lift his head. Don't worry, Izu, I got your coffee, Hitoshi said, amusement clear in his voice. Izuku grumbled a thanks and took the offered coffee, head lifting in the process. I have a bad feeling about today, he informed his friend. Hitoshi's amused demeanor fell, and he leaned closer to Izuku. I do too, we should be careful, Hitoshi admitted. Izuku nodded before gulping the whole coffee down in one go. No need to waste time drinking it slowly. The two boys were sitting in silence, waiting for their classmates to trickle in. Izuku was analyzing anyone with a close eye, not risking being in the same room as the cause of Hitoshi's and his bad feelings. He didn't see anything wrong with most. The only suspicious person was the blonde French guy. What was his name again, Yuga or something? Well, Izuku didn't think he was the reason for their anxiousness, but he will need to look into the boy more later. When Aizawa walked in, the room quieted down way faster than the last few days, and their effort was acknowledged with a satisfied nod from their teacher. Today we will be going on a field trip. You can decide if you want to wear the costumes or not. And then the teacher's eyes fell on Yaoruzo and Hagakure. Except you two, you will wear your gym uniforms till the support changes your hero costumes. The girls nodded, not looking too happy about the fact that they were picked out of the class. Izuku could understand. Having attention if one was always a whole nightmare. Today we will be going on a field trip. You can decide if you want to wear the costumes or not. And then the teacher's eyes fell on Yaoruzo and Hagakure. Except you two, you will wear your gym uniforms till the support changes your hero costumes. The girls nodded, not looking too happy about the fact that they were picked out of the class. Izuku could understand. Having attention if one was always a whole nightmare. Izuku was ignoring Ida full force when they entered the bus. His ghosts already told him the seating was different than in normal buses, so it wouldn't make sense for Izuku to stay in Ida's order. He was sitting next to Hitoshi and the pink-colored girl, tiredly leaning on his friend's shoulder. Midoriya, the frog girl, too, said, I always say what's on my mind, and I'm curious about your quirk as long as I can tell you haven't used it yet. Why is that? Izuku could feel everyone's attention on him, Aizawa-sensei's especially. Oh drama, Nico sang. Tell them about your quirk, an excited Oboro called out. Guys, Nana sighed. He won't tell them, the kid has trust issues and a need to lie about his quirk, what do you expect? Oh right. Hikaru deadpanned. Shut up, y'all know why I can't go around telling every second person about it, Izuku hissed at them, trough their mental connection. The ghosts rolled their eyes but didn't disagree otherwise. They knew that Izuku was right, such a quirk could easily be taken advantage of. I actually don't have one, he told his classmates instead, rubbing his neck in a nervous habit. Saying he was quirkless might be safer in the end, but he knew how quirkless people get treated. He pretended to be one for his whole life after all. That's actually so manly, dude, the redhead Kirishima, as long as he could remember, inquired. Izuku exchanged a confused look with his friend, not sure how to react. He never got told that being quirkless was anything positive, so excuse him for being overwhelmed. What? He said dumbly. Hitoshi huffed beside him, and the ghosts were cackling. Izuku could feel the heat rising to his cheeks, and he ducked his head. I know that I got treated badly because of having a weak quirk, but having none at all? Dude, your life must have been hell, the redhead elaborated, sounding sympathetic. Izuku could hear a quiet huff from Bakugo's direction and turned his head to him. He couldn't quite pinpoint the look in the boy's eyes, but it almost looked like guilt. When Bakugo turned his head to him and glared, Izuku quickly turned to Hitoshi. He didn't feel like getting insulted right now. We're here, their teacher grumbled, sounding done with life. Relatable if you asked Izuku. Izuku could hear a gasp from beside him when they were standing in front of a big building. Izuku followed the stare of Uraraka, who was the source of the noise, for his eyes to fall on no other than the space hero, 13. That's 13, I love her. Uraraka gushed before starting to mumble about the hero. Hitoshi looked at Izuku with an amused look. Izuku glared at him and turned towards one of his ghosts. Hey, Kudo, would you please go and get Shinomori? I need to know if danger sense is signaling danger. Kudo let out an annoyed sigh, but vanished in the next second anyway. When he came back, Shinomori was behind him, looking anxious. Izuku, the ghost whispered urgently, something is seriously wrong, my quirk won't stop pinging since I came here. Izuku immediately turned towards Hitoshi, signaling danger. The other boy was already halfway towards Aizawa-sensei when 13th finished her lecture, and they were entering the USA from what he heard. Aizawa-sensei, he could hear Hitoshi hissing, something is off, we should turn around. Izuku narrowed his eyes on the suspicious French guy when the other tensed. We can't just turn around because you have a bad feeling, kid, their teacher explained, ignoring the warning. Izuku whispered under his breath, signaling Hitoshi to let it go and come back to him. They probably had a better chance of winning against whatever would happen when they are together. As Izuku and Hitoshi had predicted, a group of villains attacked them. The little fuckers were coming through some sort of purple portal, grinning like they won the lotto. The last one that left the portal was some freak with a hand fdisich. At least that's how Izuku could explain all the hands littering the villain's body. Behind him was some sort of monster, at least that's what it looked like. The thing was standing there, obviously waiting for commands. Izuku's analytical brain immediately started to plan. The weakness of the monster thing was obviously the brain. He feared that any other part of the thing's body would regenerate. When Izuku came out of his musing, he could see a lot of ghosts floating around. If Izuku had to guess, they were the victims of the villains. Oboro, find out what the ghost's quirks are and which ones I could use without drawing too much attention, Izuku hissed trough his brain. The ghost nodded and was gone in an instant. Nugget, the sweet girl she was, cuddled into Izuku's neck a little more, trying to calm him down. 13 stay with the students, he could faintly hear Aizawa shouting. As soon as his teacher flung himself down between the villains, Izuku was sprinting toward the hand guy. If he was right, and he almost always was, then he was the leader. What does an NPC like you want here? The villain said, his voice sounding like he hadn't drunk a glass of water for years. Izuku had to physically pinch himself so as not to start laughing at the gamer language the other used. Just wanted to talk, Izuku replied, voice calmer than he was feeling. Kiddo, Nana hissed beside him, your friend is coming down here. Nugget, go help Nana, holding Hitoshi back, yeah? Yeah, they might be stronger together, but he didn't quite feel like getting his friend in danger. His cat let out a little meow and jumped onto Nana, who immediately floated down to hold the boy back. Oh, is that so? The villain asked, amusement clear in his voice. Yes. I was curious about your quest. Killing All Might, of course, the villain huffed. Izuku looked the villain up and down, making sure he could see the way Izuku judged the F out of him. You? He asked, voice laced with disbelief. The way the villain's face turned an angry red was amusing. Nomu, he growled, kill the brat. Izuku let his eyes drift over to the monster standing behind the villain. The thing immediately tensed and started to move towards Izuku. Getting your little friend to do your dirty work? He mocked, making sure his voice didn't sound as terrified as he was. Before the villain could answer, the Nomu was already jumping at Izuku, who dodged the best he could, managing to get on top of the monster. With the knife he got from one of the utility pouches he had on his hero costume, Izuku stabbed the monster in the brain. The scream it let out would hunt him forever. The blue-haired villain let out an angry scream and started to run at him when the monster fell. He didn't get far before his teacher captured him in his scarf. Shigaraki, a sudden voice said, one of the students managed to flee. No. No. The villain screamed, looking like a little child who didn't get his candy. Izuku, look out. His friend's voice sounded out, alarming Izuku a little too late, of the now standing Nomu behind him. With a sharp pain, Izuku felt the monster's hand wrap around him and press him like a lemon. Midoriya! His sensei shouted, worry clear in his voice. The last thing Izuku saw before the world went black was a worried-looking Oboro with an angry hissing nugget on his head. The last thing Izuku saw before the world went black was a worried-looking Oboro with an angry hissing nugget on his head. To say Aizawa was done with All Might is an understatement. The idiot decided that taking down small-time criminals, which a sidekick could easily take down, was more important than doing his FING job as a teacher. Of course, the man was a hero too, but teaching mattered more than small fries. Sometimes he wanted to smash his head through a wall or someone else's with a hammer. Both options were inconvenient and illogical, so he settled for imagining them. Aizawa-sensei, one of the kids whispered urgently, "Something's off, we should turn around." Aizawa looked at the kid from the edge of his vision. It was none other than Shinso Hitoshi, best friend of the most worrying student he had in years. "We can't just turn around because you have a bad feeling, kid," he told him, already getting into a slight fighting stance. Just because he couldn't turn around didn't mean he had to completely ignore the warning. Turns out the kid was right to have a bad feeling. Just a few minutes after he got warned, a purple portal opened in the middle of the plaza. There were a lot of villains stepping out, enough that Aizawa got worried about whether they could actually take them all down while saving the students. 13th, protect the students, he called back, jumping into the swarm of villains. He was in the middle of taking a guy with a rhino quirk down when his eyes landed on Midoriya running directly to the leader. He knew that the kid was reckless and distrustful, but trying to fight against the leader alone? While a hero was there to protect them. It was even worse than Aizawa expected. Aizawa was trying his DMN hardest to fight through the crowd and get to his student when he saw Shinso running to his friend. He decided to change direction and get the purple net out of the danger zone before helping Midoriya when a woman appeared in front of the boy. She had a cat on her head and was doing her best to hold Shinso back. With that out of the way, Aizawa was on his way to Midoriya again, dodging attacks left and right. The last of the no-level villains in the place hit his head hard, and he saw black for a few precious seconds. When he came back to himself, Midoriya was on top of a black monster, stabbing it with a knife in the brain. Some purple thing, probably also a villain, appeared next to the leader, telling him something. The thing that happened next confused the F out of Aizawa. For some reason, the villain held a tantrum. Why he did that? Aizawa had no clue, but if he had to decide, it was probably whatever the purple villain told him. Instead of concentrating too much on that, he made sure the low-life villains were all taken care of before sprinting to his problem student, dodging down villains all the while. "Izuku, look out!" He heard Shinso warn his friend. When he snapped his head to look at the kid, he saw him getting crushed in the grip of the monster thing. Despite all logic, he screamed out, "Midoriya," in panic. Before Aizawa could reach his student, a blue-haired person, who looked a little too much like his dead friend, appeared between the kid and the villain, an angry hissing cat in his head. "Don't even think about hurting him," they growled. "Another NPC, this will be fun," the villain rasped with his dry voice. "Yeah, for me, when I crush your head into the asphalt," the other person sassed back, standing in a perfect fighting stance. At that moment, Aizawa finally reached his unconscious student, crouching down beside him. With growing relief, he felt the kid's steady heartbeat. To his surprise, Midoriya opened his eyes at that moment, sitting up with a loud groan. "Man, last time Mom beat me up that hard was after she found out I was quirkless," the boy mumbled, probably not realizing what exactly he just said. "What?" Aizawa growled. Izuku wanted to die. If he was lucky, he could get to the villain and provoke him enough to do it for him. Why was he so stupid? He just had to start blabbering about his home life in front of his teacher. And in the middle of a villain attack too. "Nothing, sensei, don't worry," he lied through his teeth. "We're gonna talk about that later," the teacher warned before they both turned to the hand villain. "That's Shigaraki Tamura," Izuku explained, "the same guy I gave you the info sheets about." "That makes things a lot easier," the teacher sighed. Izuku dragged himself to his feet, looking over the battlefield, realizing he couldn't see many of his classmates. With growing panic, he searched for the familiar indigo-colored hair. Relief floated him when he saw his friend running in his direction. "Izuku!" he screamed. Izuku waited till both his sensei and his friend were standing next to him before starting to explain his plan. "Okay, So the Nomu is out of the way right now, Izuku started, only to get interrupted by his sensei. What happened anyway? Didn't the thing just attack you? The blue-haired guy that's holding Shigaraki back knocked it out somehow, Hitoshi explained to them. Well, anyway, we need to incapacitate his hands, so he can't use his quirk anymore. Yeah, we could use Eraser, but it has a time limit. You mean Aizawa and me, right? Hitoshi asked, warning clearly in his voice. Izuku already opened his mouth, ready to get into a screaming match with Hitoshi, when his teacher intervened. He's right, problem child, you can barely stand. If I see you fighting, I'll expel you. Izuku rolled his eyes but plumped down, arms crossed. Fine, but if you look like you need help, I'm gonna do something. The others both sighed before running into the fight. Exactly at the moment both were ready to fight, Oboro got intangible again, and Izuku had a lap full of cat. I'm fine, Nugget, don't worry. Yeah, right? One of the nearest ghost huffed. As soon as the adrenaline fades out, you're gonna fall into a FING coma, kid. Izuku took that personally. He wasn't that weak to fall into a coma from a few broken ribs. Instead of concerning himself with the ghost, he flipped them off and turned toward the fight, ready to intervene with his quirk if necessary. Eris Sirhead, Shigaraki smirks, did you finally decide to join the fun? Hey, I'm also here, fucker, Hitoshi demands, drawing attention to himself. Huh, Shigaraki growled, his face scrunching up in anger. Please, please, please let it be enough answer, Izuku begged internally. To Izuku's luck, his wishes were fulfilled, and Shigaraki's eyes glazed over. Cut his pinkies off before the purple guy does anything. Izuku screamed at the top of his lungs. The disturbed looks he got from his teacher, and a few ghosts around him in response, were worth it when Hitoshi cut the pinkies off. Shigaraki came back to himself through the pain just a few moments later, screaming and cursing as if someone had just cut his fingers off. That might be because Toshi just did, Izuku mused to himself, giggling silently. Before he could celebrate, a purple portal opened underneath the villain, swallowing him. He could faintly hear his teacher swearing, but his attention was at the door where he could see a lot of the ghosts crowding. He could feel his body tensing, which was not helping the wounds littering his body, before the door got slammed open by none other than All Might. He could feel his body tensing, which was not helping the wounds littering his body, before the door got slammed open by none other than All Might. The hero was standing there, ever their smile nowhere to be seen on his face. Oh, someone's in a bad mood, Izuku thought to himself to lighten the situation. With a sharp pain in his chest, Izuku realized that the arena line was fading. The edges of his eyes were already getting darker. He let out a loud groan when he could literally feel his ribs stabbing into his chest. The growing realization that one of them would probably puncture his lungs if he moved too much was not helping the growing panic in his chest. With a last hurtful breath, he passed out again, cursing whatever being decided to F with him today. Told ya, the ghost sighed to himself, shaking his head. When Hizashi heard that they lost contact with the USJ, he immediately jumped up and ran out of the classroom he was teaching at, hoping to God his students wouldn't get into too much trouble while he was gone. The first thing he saw when he opened the door was his husband kneeling beside a critically wounded child. If he was correct, it was Midoriya Izuku, the one show always talks about. Besides him was a kid with gravity-defying purple hair. Hizashi left the other students to his colleagues and ran down to the plaza, letting himself fall to his knees beside his husband. What wounds does he have? From what I can see, he has a broken rib and a few bruised ones. His body is mangled from the Nomu crushing him, the love of his life explained. With one last look at the kid who was holding Midoriya in his arms, he turned to the paramedics, leading them over to the unconscious kid. Izuku was in a hospital. That was the first thing he noticed, and he immediately started to panic. His experience with hospitals wasn't the best, so sue him for it. He couldn't breath. Why couldn't he breath? They did something, didn't they? Zuku, calm down, I'm here, you're fine. He could hear his favorite person muttering, or was he screaming? Izuku didn't know. Everything was so loud and so quiet at the same time. He felt someone hugging him and he flinched. It's me, Hitoshi. As soon as Izuku heard these words, his whole body calmed down, and he fell forward into his hopefully soon-to-be boyfriend. The next time Izuku awoke again, he was much calmer than before. He looked around the room and saw Hitoshi sleeping on one of these uncomfortable hospital chairs. He climbed out of the bed he was lying in and shook Hitoshi a little. The boy opened his eyes and grumbled something about cats in green jumpers. "Hey, Toshi," he greeted, only to get tackled into a hug. Izuku could feel his ribs starting to throb, but ignored it in favor of holding his best friend close. "Are you hurt?" he asked. He could feel Hitoshi shaking his head in the crook of his neck. "Zuku," the boy mumbled hesitantly, "I really need to tell you something, but you have to promise that it won't make anything weird between us, yeah?" Izuku was a little confused. He had never seen Hitoshi like that before. He was less sassy and tired goblin energy and more nervous. It made it so obvious that whatever Hitoshi had on his mind was important. "I promise nothing can make anything weird between us." He stated, his voice more serious than ever before. The boy took a deep breath and looked up from where his head was still hidden in Izuku's neck. "Izuku, I like you. Like I really, really like you romantically," the boy whispered, seemingly too afraid to speak any louder. Izuku stared and stared and stared a little more. It was the wrong way to go, as he realized a few minutes of staring later when Hitoshi began to talk again. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, I'll leave." "No, wait," Izuku shouted after the boy, who paused and turned around, confusion in his eyes. "I love you too, Toshi. I should have said something instead of staring like a brain-dead zombie. I'm such an a-hole, I'm sorry, Hitoshi, please don't hate me now. It's fine if I need a few minutes or something. It's fine if you need a few minutes or something." Before Izuku could continue with his mutter storm, he felt Hitoshi's lips on his. "It's fine, Zuku," Hitoshi calmed him. For some reason unbeknownst to Izuku, his wounds decided it was the perfect time to start up again, and Izuku fell to his knees with a groan. "Are you okay, Izuku? Wait, let me help you to your bed." Izuku was lying back in his bed, his head in Hitoshi's lap, when the door opened and Hitoshi's parents walked in. To the boy's surprise, Mike was behind them, holding hands with his homeroom teacher. "Hey kiddo, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine. He just fell because of his wounds, don't listen to him," Hitoshi interrupted him. Izuku took to glaring at the wall while his now boyfriend, he had a fuckage boyfriend and it was the love of his life, was speaking with the adults. "Did you tell him how long he was in a coma yet?" Izuku could distinctly hear his English teacher's voice, but he was too occupied with glaring dangers at his boyfriend to decipher the man's words quite yet. "Not yet, he just woke up and nearly died by standing up when he was supposed to stay in bed." The last few words were definitely meant for him to hear. "Wait, what does he mean by how long I was in a coma?" "Hitoshi," Izuku started, voice filled with dread, "how long was I out?" The boy froze and turned to him, a nervous expression on his face that Izuku would love to kiss. "Ow. Nope. Focus, Izuku. You may have been passed out for over a week, but don't worry, everyone else is fine." Hitoshi tried to reassure Izuku. Spoiler, it failed miserably. Toshi, I'm dead if my moo dash dot. He paused, turning to the teachers in the room. "It's fine," Susie placated him, "we talked with your teachers, the beach won't hurt you again." "Dad," Hitoshi hissed. "He's right," Aizawa cut in, "if it's fine with you, Hizashi and I would like to foster you." Q. Izuku.exe stopped working. "He's right," Aizawa cut in, "if it's fine with you, Hizashi and I would like to foster you." Q. Izuku.exe stopped working. "Kid." "Mike, no, wait," Hizashi asked uncertainly, "you don't have to if you don't want, we can easily find someone you're more comfortable with." "That's not it," Izuku muttered, sending a pleading look in his boyfriend's direction in hopes of getting a little help. He wasn't good with social interaction, even less so when people cared about him. "Can you give us a second?" His knight in shining armor, or a black hoodie doesn't really matter, asked. The adults exchanged worried looks but left. "Listen, beautiful, Izuku blushed. "They only want to help and I was with them a lot in the week you were unconscious, I would trust them both with my life." Izuku considered it for a second. "Okay, but only, 'Cause you trust them, he agreed in the end. Hitoshi gave him a grateful, determined smile and turned to let the adults back in. His throat felt dry all of a sudden and he swallowed in hope to get the words out, but the feeling of thorns wrapping around his throat and squeezing didn't lessen. Did you decide yet, Izuku? Kyoko prompted gently, after Izuku didn't say anything for a few minutes. He nodded and then started signing in hopes somebody could understand sign language. The last time he had to use it was when Inko had been heavily drunk and beat Izuku till he blacked out. When he woke up again, he wasn't able to get anything out for about 2 weeks. I'm fine with being fostered by the two. Sumi nodded and gave Izuku a sad smile. Don't force yourself to speak, selective muteness can be a beach sometimes. Izuku gave the man a grateful smile and waved Hitoshi back to the bed. The doctor said you have to stay here for 1 more day. Under observation, and if everything seems fine you can come home with us tomorrow, and don't worry about not speaking, we both know sign language, Aizawa informed him. Any wishes for your room aesthetic? Hisashi inquired, looking like an excited puppy. Dark green, ghosts, and cats. He signed, already feeling much calmer now that he knew everyone was supportive and understanding. Alrighty, the man practically screamed. Izuku could see the suspicion in Aizawa's gaze. If he had to guess, the man noticed something about his quirk at the USJ, but he chose to ignore it for now. He didn't need to worry about something that's easily fixed later on. The next day, Izuku woke up with an anxious feeling in his stomach. He looked at the ceiling for a long moment before realizing that he was lying on something that was definitely no cushion. He froze up and slowly turned his head only to realize that the thing he was lying on was his boyfriend. Mornin' love, the lilac-haired boy slurred, clearly only just waking up. Morning kitty, Izuku signed with the best of his abilities. It was harder than expected considering he was lying on his boyfriend's chest. Ready to go to your new home? His favorite person asked, voice soft. Taking Izuku's nod as a cue, Hitoshi took his phone to tell his parents that they would be ready in a few minutes. A few minutes later they were clothed, full, and ready to go. While they were sitting in the bed talking, or in Izuku's case, signing, the door opened and Izuku's new foster parents entered the room. Hey kiddos, how you feeling? Hisashi said with too much energy for that early in the morning. We're fine actually, how about you? Hitoshi asked, trying to hold a conversation with as good as none social skills. Tired, came the dry answer of their homeroom teacher. Izuku giggled with a signed, same. Meow. Izuku heard, making him snap his head in his little friend's direction. The other people in the room looked at him in confusion. What's up, Zuzu? Nugget, Izuku informed, getting quizzical looks from his new foster parents. Well, Hitoshi started, it seems like I'm gonna explain his quirk to you. The two men looked at each other in confusion before nodding at Hitoshi. We're listening. Izuku has a quirk that allows him to see. That was the point. Izuku's brain focused on the 3 ghosts hanging head down from the ceiling, making faces at him. Nico, Chisame, I missed you guys. Thankfully Izuku could still speak over the link even though he couldn't with his mouth. The others were here a few times too. Chisame smiled at him. Dude, never do that again. We're already 3 dead people, we don't need more, Nico muttered. Even though it would be kinda cool to chill with you in walls, Hikaru mumbled. Izuku giggled a little and shook his head. My apologies are you for surviving, I make sure to die next time. That's unfair, why does he get a nickname? Your name's already so short there's no way I could give you a nickname, and Chisame is same. At some point, Izuku became aware of the conversation between Hitoshi and his foster parents ending and he tuned back in. Oboro was all he could make out. They all turned to him with a questioning look. What? He signed. They asked if the blue-haired guy who held Shigaraki back was Oboro and if you used his quirk at the entrance exam, his boyfriend explained. Yeah, that was him, Izuku affirmed. The 2 adults exchanged looks, Hisashi looking about to cry. Hey Oboro, you might want to come here for a bit, Izuku informed his friend. Just a moment later he appeared in the room, eyes immediately falling onto the 2 down men. What happened? Are they okay? They found out, or more like Hitoshi told them about my quirk, so they kind of figured you exist. Izuku conveyed, unsure. Can we see him? Hisashi asked hopefully, voice sounding wet. Izuku nodded, allowing Nugget to jump onto Oboro's head. Hey guys, the blue-haired ghost greeted awkwardly. Izuku nodded, allowing Nugget to jump onto Oboro's head. Hey guys, the blue-haired ghost greeted awkwardly. Both men stared at the still like a ghost teen-looking ghost. They didn't know how to react. It was the first time they saw him, alive or dead, in over 5 years. "OBO," Mike whispered, seemingly too afraid to speak the name. "Hey, Zashi," Oboro replied awkwardly, not sure how to speak with the two men he had watched for years, without the possibility of talking to them. The three men looked at each other with a painfully soft look in their eyes that had Hikaru mock-gagging, before Hizashi teared up. This led to Oboro tearing up, and Izuku will never get over the name sighing in a fond manner. Izuku got their attention by waving wildly till Hitoshi helped him. "Guys, Izuku wants something," he said just loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "I'm so sorry to cut this short, but Nugget is getting tired. If you have to say something important, then do that now." Izuku sighed guiltily, not happy that he had to end their conversation. "Won't we see him again?" Hizashi mumbled. "No, I'm not really supposed to intervene in the whole dead and alive thing much," Izuku explained sadly. The man nodded in understanding before they turned back towards each other. "Me and Sho really wanted to tell you something before you died." The man choked on the word died, and it squeezed Izuku's heartstrings. "We really like you and wanted to ask you out on a date," Aizawa finished the sentence. Izuku had to turn away at the look in their eyes. If he looked, he wouldn't be able to separate them again. Hitoshi gave Izuku a soft smile and scooted over in the bed till he was close enough that Izuku could drape himself over his lap. And that was exactly what Izuku did. They got closure, something they thought they'd never get. His boyfriend soothed his worries, one hand combing through Izuku's curly hair. "I'm sorry you never got to do it," Oboro whispered. "I would have said yes if it helps." The three lovers fell into a hug, and Nugget let out an urgent meow. "They have about a minute left," Izuku let Hitoshi know, who told the group. "That's a goodbye then." Oboro smiled sadly. "I love y'all and I'll be watching from the sidelines." Before anyone could answer, Nugget jumped from Oboro's head, leaving the ghost intangible and invisible again. "Thanks so much, Izuku," Mike thanked him, looking like he wanted nothing more than to hug him. Izuku nodded in acknowledgement but didn't react much more. He was still feeling guilty for ending their conversation like that. "Mo?" Nugget mowed worriedly. "No, you did nothing wrong, sweetie," he assured the kitten. After the two heroes had recovered from their emotional reunion, they checked Izuku out and packed his things in the car. "We don't live far from here," Aizawa told him, "just a few minutes. If Shinso wants to come with us, that's fine." Izuku did not like the knowing looks the adults traded. He did though like the soft, questioning look his boyfriend gave him. He was so undeniably in love. "Please," he signed, and, after another reassuring nod from Hizashi, Hitoshi sat down beside him in the car. The rest of the way, Izuku either napped on Hitoshi's shoulder, chatted with the ghosts that somehow floated besides the car window, or had sign talks with his boyfriend. How they did all that in the few minutes from the hospital to the Yazawa household, I don't know. "We have 2 cats," Aizawa mentioned while opening the door. "They are named Sekiten and Rin." The 2 felines were standing in the doorway when the man opened the door. One of them was black and had eyes that screamed mischief. Izuku already loved the cat. He was sure Hitoshi would love them as much as he did, but he sadly had to excuse himself to a phone call. It was his cousin telling him that he needed to come home. The black one is Sekiten, the white is Rin. At that, Izuku's eyes roamed trough the room, looking for a white feline. After a short while of searching, they landed on a majestic white calico that gave off a auto of royalty. With an excited meow, his cat jumped down and plopped down in front of Sekiten. "Seems like Nugget gets along well with Sekiten," Oboro mused, getting an agreeing nod from Izuku. "It's going to get so awkward living with the 2 people you told embarrassing stories about," Izuku whined in his head, getting a chuckle from Oboro. "I still have some funny stories." He wiggled his eyebrows, getting a chocolate laugh from Izuku that had the 2 heroes turning to him. They were deep in a conversation before, but now that they heard their new foster kid was laughing, it wasn't that important what they'd eat for lunch today. Izuku stared at them with startled eyes before turning to glare at his friend. "How about a house tour?" Mike's excited voice rang out. drawing Izuku's attention back to him. With a nod, the tour started. They first walked through the corridor. Here in the left will be your room. I already decorated a little, I hope you'll like it. On the other side is mine and Shota's room. If the door's closed, knock before coming in. Otherwise you can come to us with everything. Here we have 2 bathrooms, one with a shower, the other just a toilet and sink. You already saw the living room and the kitchen is in the living room, Hisashi rambled on. Izuku trotted after him, absolutely overwhelmed. If other people felt like that whenever he was mumbling, it really wasn't a surprise. Katsuki was always so annoyed with him. Any questions? Hisashi finished. Is there a limit on the warm water? I can shower cold if so. Nope, no limit, take as long as you need, the man reassured. Well, kiddo, the gruff voice of his homeroom teacher sounded behind him, startling him so badly that he cosplayed a cat and jumped to the ceiling. You can go look at your room if you want to, after you got down from the ceiling, that is. YK, you could have just asked, I would have gladly lifted you up, Oboro chuckled. The boy in question glared with a look that promised death and jumped down from the ceiling, landing in a crouch. You didn't see that, he signed before retreating into his room, leaving his new guardians to chuckle behind. The boy in question glared with a look that promised death and jumped down from the ceiling, landing in a crouch. You didn't see that, he signed before retreating into his room, leaving his new guardians to chuckle behind. Once Izuku entered his new room, the air was pushed out of him in amazement. He had known that Hisashi decided to decorate his room before he was released from the hospital, but he had never expected him to overdo it like that. The wall facing was a big bed, directly beside a window that had beautiful, dark green curtains hiding him from the outside. There was a line of fairy lights running around the room, hanging gorgeously from the ceiling. The desk, which was standing on the right wall, had notebook after notebook neatly stacked on each other. Going around the whole desk was a bookshelf. With a quiet gasp, Izuku found his favorite thing in the whole room, a really nice-looking, light blue beanbag, patterned with ghosts that were doing random things. It was sitting right at the end of his bed. On the left side was a big, white wall where he could write, draw, and theorize. Tears slowly running down his face, Izuku turned in a circle, mustering his own room once again before sprinting to where he could hear his guardians conversing. Izuku, the surprised voice of his normally stoic homeroom teacher made him cry even more, barely managing to get air into his lungs. He couldn't understand why. Why would someone take the time out of their day to decorate a whole room for him? Why would someone want to foster him? Why would someone buy new things for him? Why? Zuku, he could hear Oboro's worried voice whisper. The chaos trio like Izuku, called Hiko, Nico and Chisame, was worriedly floating around him. Izuku honey, he could hear Hisashi's voice ringing out faintly, I need you to breathe with me, sweetie. It made Izuku panic even more. They were too kind to him, they shouldn't act like that. His breath came out in shallow gasps as his chest started to squeeze tight around his heart. A loud ringing entered his ears, and his senses began to feel too much and nothing at all at the same time. He could swear he felt his stomach twisting, the nausea getting worse and worse every minute. No matter how hard Izuku tried, how hard he tried to breathe normally or forcibly relax his body, the shaking wouldn't stop. More and more tears were flowing down his face to the point that he wasn't able to see through the tears anymore. Kiddo, in the back of his mind, Izuku realized the voice belonged to Nana. One of the others must have called her when he started to panic. Kiddo, can you try and match my breathing please? Her voice was filled with worry and urgency, bringing Izuku to think clear enough to start and try breathing with her. After a few tries, Izuku's breathing got back to a calmer state, making his senses sharpen again. With start he realized that his new guardians were trying to get his attention. Hisashi was even crying if Izuku wasn't imagining things. Izuku, can you hear me? Aizawa's voice rang out. With a JRK of his head, Izuku let him know that he could indeed hear him. Good, that's good, the man muttered. Do you feel ready to tell us what triggered the panic attack? Izuku leaned back from where he was hidden in Aizawa's chest and started signing. It's nothing, just me being stupid. That really didn't look like nothing, Hisashi's shaky voice concluded. I'm just not used to being cared for. The two men exchanged looks that Izuku wasn't mentally ready to figure out before Hisashi stood up and walked into the kitchen. How about you're gonna stay here and watch a movie with us till you wanna go to your room? Aizawa asked. Izuku shrugged but didn't make a move from the hero's lap he somehow got into. Want anything to drink or eat? Hisashi shouted from the kitchen. Izuku shook his head, which got translated to Hisashi, who came back a few minutes later with a glass of water for everybody. I know you said you didn't want anything, but after your panic attack, it might be good to drink something, Hisashi explained. Izuku could agree to that logic and didn't really see any reason not to drink something, so with a still a little shaky head Izuku took the glass and gulped it down in one go. The two heroes shook their heads fondly and refilled the glass, this time putting it into the coffee table in front of the couch. Amy movie wishes? Hisashi required, already starting the TV. With a shake of his head, Izuku let himself relax in his new guardian's lap, leaning half onto him. The next day, Izuku found himself waking up in his bed to a constant ringing phone. With a start, Izuku realized it was his phone, and the only person who would be calling was Hitoshi. Stifling a yawn, Izuku took the call, immediately wide awake at the quiet sobs and shaky breathing on the other side. Babe, what's going on? Are you all right? He was sure he was waking at least one of the heroes he was living with up with the way he was practically screaming, but Izuku was panicking. Normally, he wouldn't even be able to whisper after the emotional day before, and the way his selective muteness was already making it impossible to use his voice, but the worry for his boyfriend overrode the tightness in his throat. Mom and Dad, his love sobbed out, they got into a villain attack on the way from the hospital, Mom's in a coma, and Dad won't be able to leave the hospital for the next week. Izuku took a sharp intake of breath, already halfway to the door, when his guardians left their room to look at the surge of the screaming that early in the morning. Izuku, where are you going? Aizawa shouted after him when he ran through the door, getting completely ignored by the overly worried and guilty Izuku. He knew that the villain attack wasn't his fault, and he didn't have any valid reason for blaming himself, but it was he they visited before getting attacked. I'm in my way over, Kitty, meet me at the lobby? An affirmative hum was the only response Izuku got, or needed. About 10 minutes later, Izuku sprinting the whole way, the boy stormed into the hospital, eyes immediately searching for the love of his life. There, curled up on one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, was a lilac-haired teen. Toshi was the only warning the boy got before his boyfriend was embracing him in the world's most comforting hug. I'm so sorry I didn't get here sooner, Izuku apologized. It's fine. Izuku reluctantly moved away from Hitoshi and helped him up. The other boy understood Izuku perfectly and started walking to his parents' hospital room. When they reached the door, Hitoshi paused, turning around. I don't think I could look at them. Izuku nodded understanding, taking Hitoshi's hands in his. Do you want me to go in there alone, or do you want me to wait with you here till Aizawa and Hisashi get here, or until you feel ready to go in there with me? Izuku spoke softly, making sure his boyfriend could hear that the choice was his. Waiting? He asked, and Izuku nodded. Waiting? He asked, and Izuku nodded. After about 15 minutes, Izuku's guardians sprinted into the hall, pausing when they saw him and the red-eyed Hitoshi. Oh, baby, what happened? Hisashi's mutter hen came out. Hitoshi sent Izuku a pleading look that was immediately translated to, can you tell them? So that's what Izuku did. Oh, honey, Hisashi soothed the still silent tears crying Hitoshi, I'm sure they're going to be fine. Aizawa, who till then was standing off to the side, awkwardly nodded. Shinso, a doctor who had just left the room of the two parents, greeted. Your dad looks stable enough, but your mum isn't in the best condition, and we're not sure if she will make a recovery. His boyfriend, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, letting Hitoshi lean on him, gave the boy a small, worried smile. Your mum is strong, she'll make it. Hitoshi nodded and climbed to his feet, slowly walking up to the door. He noticed how his precious boyfriend was getting up behind him with a loud groan. Babe? Can we see them? He asked Izuku, back turned to him and staring at the door. Yeah, sure, as long as you're ready. A nod and long, existential questioning sigh later, and the four people entered the room. Hitoshi immediately beelined to the beds, standing between both trying and failing to look at both his parents at the same time. After doing that for a good minute, he decided to take a good look at his father first. From what the doctors told him, the man was in a good state. "Dad," he whispered, voice breaking slightly at the way his dad smiled at him with tired eyes. "Hey champ, how are you doing?" "Dad, I'm so sorry I wasn't there with you guys," Hitoshi apologized, completely ignoring the question. "You wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway. The only thing you being there would have done is getting hurt yourself," the men dismissed. Hitoshi nodded slightly, obviously not quite believing it but still seeing the logic behind the sentence. After he made sure to tell his dad just how much he loved him, and how he would never talk with him again if he did something like getting himself in the hospital, he turned toward his mom. The woman was clearly in the worst shape of his two parents. Slowly, he took the woman's hand in his, letting the slowly pumping pulse smooth his anxiety a little. Point 4. "Mum, Dad says he wants you to wake up again," he whispered, getting no response. They left the hospital just a few hours later. Hitoshi was silently walking behind Izuku, holding his hand in a tight grip. Izuku was worried. He was even more worried than the time he found Nugget's dead body. He knew that his boyfriend was already struggling mentally from all the bullying in middle school, and now that both of his parents, the one people who were always there for him, were in the hospital, it was sure to get worse. "Toshi, babe," he whispered, hoping that the boy would answer. He had no such luck. Without more than tightening his grip, Hitoshi continued trotting after him, staring at the ground. When they finally entered the Yamazawa household, Hitoshi still hadn't done more than squeeze Izuku's hand from time to time. It was better than nothing, but the lack of sass and reaction worried Izuku immensely. Izuku took his shoes off and, because his boyfriend was not able to do it himself, also took the shoes off Hitoshi. "Hisashi, Aizawa, is it okay if Hitoshi sleeps in my room tonight?" The man exchanged worried looks when they saw the state Hitoshi was in. Izuku could relate. He was worried. "That's fine," Aizawa answered and waved them off toward Izuku's room. Izuku pulled the covers over his sleeping boyfriend. As soon as the boy hit the pillow, his eyes closed. It relieved Izuku enormously to see the boy looking so peaceful, at least in his sleep. He wished he could help him look the same awake. He let out a long sigh and lay down in the sleeping bag he had stolen from his guardian. It wasn't that he didn't want to cuddle with the love of his life. It was just that he wasn't sure if it was appreciated at the moment. He shook his head and closed his eyes. The sleeping pills he had taken before going to his room were working perfectly fine, and he was engulfed in an endless darkness. The next morning, Izuku woke up to Ed shaking him awake, a panicked look on his face. "Come on, wake up, brat. Your boyfriend is on the way to a high building." At that, Izuku's eyes snapped open, and he stormed out, not even bothering to put his shoes on. "Show me the way, Ed," he screamed over the early morning traffic. With rising panic and not enough sleep for such a morning sprint, Izuku barreled up the stairs to the roof, which he had led him to. There at the edge of the roof stood his boyfriend in all his glory, the rays of the upcoming sun giving him the look of an angel, at least for Izuku. "Toshi," he shouted, making the boy turn. "Izuku," the boy breathed, stumbling down from the ledge and barreling into Izuku's chest. "I'm so sorry, so sorry," the purple net muttered, clearly distressed. "Nothing to apologize for, my love," he breathed into the ear of his loved one. He really wanted to know what had brought Hitoshi up here. Of course, the obvious answer was his parents, but it didn't make much sense for Izuku, considering they were still alive. After a while of just sitting there, sobbing into each other's chests and squeezing the air out of each other, the boys began to climb the stairs back down. When they reached the ground, Izuku's foster parents were sending them concerned but also angry looks. Izuku could feel Hitoshi sinking into himself. "Later," were the only words that left Izuku's mouth as he pushed past the two heroes and moved back toward his new house. Izuku immediately sat his boyfriend on his bed and pushed a mug of hot coffee into his hands. With a tired sigh, he took Nuggets from High Shoulders and sat her in Hitoshi's lap. The boy didn't realize that, to deep into wherever his head had switched to. "Hitoshi," he tried getting the lilac-haired boy's attention with a little snip of his fingers. "Wanna cuddle with Nugget? I'd let you cuddle Sekitan and Rin too," but I don't know them well enough yet. Hitoshi let out an agreeing hum, which prompted Izuku to speak with Nugget. Hey sweetheart, would you mind becoming tangible and cuddle with Hitoshi for a bit? He's not feeling well? With a confirming meow, his cat turned tangible, cuddling into Hitoshi. With a slight laugh, Izuku saw the way Hitoshi's lip quirked up in one of his half-smiles that made Izuku fall in love all over again. The next morning, Izuku had the impression that Hitoshi was feeling better again. He was still down, and smiling wasn't on the bucket list, but he was holding up a lot better than the day before. They were sitting in his room still, wanting a little time for themselves before going down for breakfast. Hey, Toshi, did anything happen yesterday that made you go up the roof? He made sure that his voice was soft and open. The other boy paused, looking at Izuku in confusion. You don't know? Izuku shook his head, now a little confused. I got a call from the hospital yesterday. Mom died and Dad, his boyfriend choked on the words, making Izuku's heart break into 100 pieces again. Dad went after her. And oh, Izuku understood now. Trying to hold himself together, because even though he wanted to grieve Kyoko and Sumi, his boyfriend needed him, he took Hitoshi into a crushing hug. They didn't exchange any words or empty platitudes, they were just leaning on each other and existing in the other's presence. Izuku was angry at Sumi for forgetting about his son, the boy who was so kind and understanding. He needed to be here for Hitoshi at the moment, though, so he pushed all of that far away into a little box labeled, "Things to Think About Later," and locked it in there. After they had sat like that for who knows how long, Izuku turned and looked back towards Hitoshi, finding his tired, sad eyes. Can you promise me not to try again without at least talking to me? He asked. It was silent for a minute, and Izuku feared the other one wouldn't answer. It would be fine, and he wouldn't push for an answer, but he would feel a whole lot better to know his boyfriend would count on him. I promise, he nodded, a small smile on his face. It was silent for a minute, and Izuku feared the other one wouldn't answer. It would be fine, and he wouldn't push for an answer, but he would feel a whole lot better to know his boyfriend would count on him. I promise, he nodded, a small smile on his face. Thank you, Izuku breathed, letting himself fall into his boyfriend's chest. I love you so much, please never do this again, he begged, letting himself break just the slightest bit. He couldn't afford to completely break, his boyfriend needed him. But in the safety of Hitoshi's warm arms, feeling his warm breath on his head and the slight rise of the boy's chest was enough to make him let go just this bit. I love you too, Zuku. The Yamazawa family, Hitoshi and Izuku, were sitting at the dinner table. A beautiful view of American food in front of them. With a thankful smile to Hizashi, the chef, they dug in. It's so good, Izuku ummed with a spoonful of food in his mouth. Izuku, no talking while eating. The boy rolled his eyes and continued inhaling the food, Hitoshi giggling beside him. Izuku was so relieved that the boy was laughing again that he wanted to cry. He wouldn't, of course, but he wanted to. After they finished eating, Aizawa and Hizashi exchanged solemn looks and took a deep breath. Hitoshi, we have to talk about your new dash, the blonde hero paused, not getting the rest of the sentence out. We need to talk about where you'll stay. If you want, we could foster you, but considering you both are a couple, and being brothers and boyfriends might get weird, we thought you would like to stay somewhere else, Aizawa ended. Yeah, is there any family member who could take you? Hizashi added. The purple-net mutely shook his head, grasping Izuku's hand under the table. Izuku wanted to glare and hiss at his guardians for ruining all the progress he had made, but he would let them finish first, who knows what they have to say. That's fine. Do you want us to ask our friend? You know her as Midnight, but I promise she's privately a lot less R-rated, Hizashi explained. Sure, Hitoshi mumbled. The two adults nodded and left the room, presumably calling Midnight. You all right? Izuku required, looking at his boyfriend. I'm not sure, I would say yes, but I really just want to sleep for the rest of my life, the boy in question muttered as he answered. As soon as we can, you'll get a therapist. The voice of their homeroom teacher rang out, and both boys snapped their heads in his direction. For both of you, actually. The kids groaned but didn't disagree any other way. They weren't stupid, both of them just lost their home, family, and had their own experience with quirk discrimination. There really was no way to get out of that without some kind of mental health issue. His guardians did find them both coming down from a roof crying too, after all. Anyways, Nemuri would love to take you in for however long, the Ravenet informed them, taking a seat on the couch standing in the living room. Izuku grinned at Hitoshi, who gave him a fond grin back. She'll come over in a few hours if that's okay with you. Hitoshi nodded, his grin shifting to something strained. The rest of the morning was spent cuddling and telling the ghosts about all the events that had played out over the last couple of days. The Chaos Trio was a curious bundle. The ringing of the doorbell had the boys looking up. With a bright smile, Hisashi was standing up from where he had been sitting on the couch. Seems like Nem is here, you're ready? Hitoshi took a deep breath before nodding, pushing himself up. With a reassuring smile, Hisashi opened the door, revealing a woman in an oversized hoodie and baggy, ripped jeans, midnight. Hey, she greeted, eyes falling onto Hitoshi's. You're Hitoshi, yeah? The boy in question nodded. Nice meeting you, I'm Nemuri Kiyama, but you can call me Nem. Hitoshi Shinso, Hitoshi is fine, Izuku's boyfriend mumbled. Taking the boy's hand, Izuku squeezed it reassuringly. To everyone else, Hitoshi might look uninterested, but to him, it was clear that the boy was just as anxious as Nemuri was, probably even more so. Are you okay with living with me? The woman required, sounding a little unsure now. Izuku couldn't really fault her. It was a really spontaneous thing for all of them. His boyfriend nodded, too nervous to speak. Do you want me to do the talking? Izuku whispered, getting a relieved nod. He'd love to, he's just too nervous for the whole talking thing, Izuku let the woman know. A relieved sigh escaped Nemuri, and she nodded, giving Izuku a thankful smile. That's fine, you don't have to talk if you don't want to. Hitoshi managed a small smile before opening his mouth. It's fine, I would love for you to take me in if you want to, that is. Of course I do, otherwise I wouldn't be here, Nem reassured with a playful but still serious grin on her face. After that problem was out of the way, the two were trying to bond, playing games together, watching movies, and mostly talking. It was awkward at the start, considering they didn't know each other well yet, but after the third round of Uno, the boy got comfortable with Nem, and they were teasing and laughing together. At the end of the day, Hitoshi was ready to move in with Nemuri, and the two lovers said goodbye at the door with heavy hearts. They knew that it wasn't a forever goodbye, but they were still both in new environments and weren't able to calm each other down if they had any nightmares. The next few weeks' break that the boys had from school was used to their fullest. Going to the amusement parks, swimming pools, the arcade, the park, and even sleepovers were frequent for the two. They got closer with their new guardians over time, too. They even started calling them parents in their heads. Look at these cats, kitty, Izuku shouted over the noise of the amusement park, pointing at a play automat that had two matching stuffed cats inside. One of the cats was a pretty purple with green eyes, while the other was colored a mint green with dark purple eyes. They were the perfect colors for both of them. Dad, Izuku screamed to get the attention of his parents, freezing as soon as he realized what he had just done. With wide eyes, he turned to a smirking Hitoshi. I was waiting for this moment, he let Izuku know, a greediness in his voice that had Izuku glaring. When will you start calling Auntie Nem, Mum, then? He asked. Already did, came the playful voice of Nemuri from behind Izuku. When he turned around, he saw his pops with happy tears in his eyes, and even his dad had a small smile on his face. That alone was a rarity on the man's face, considering his whole personality was secretly a softy that hid behind a mask of stoic disinterest. He had a soft and fond look in his eyes whenever he was looking at one of his family members, but the man wasn't a smiley person. The two boys did get the stuffed cats after a long, very emotional at least for Hisashi celebration. With an exhausted sigh, Izuku stared up at the UA gate, eyes full of calmness and satisfaction that wasn't there before. Besides him was his perfect boyfriend's holding his hand. It wasn't surprising at the start, he didn't have anyone besides his ghosts at his side. Now he had an amazing boyfriend he would do everything for, a family that loved him. Both he and Hitoshi got adopted a few weeks before, and of course an aunt that wouldn't leave him alone. Hey, Toshi, Zuku, A voice rang out from behind them, bringing a small smile to Izuku's face. He nearly forgot about Haruka. After the young man had heard about the situation with Hitoshi's parents, he had immediately called to make sure the boy was safe. After hearing that he got fostered by someone who showed Hitoshi the love and care he deserved, they were meeting up a lot more often than before. If Izuku, and to guess why, then it was because the man felt guilty for not being there for Hitoshi. It wasn't his fault. He only heard of the death of his aunt and uncle a week later. At that time, Hitoshi was already happily living with Auntie Nem.